Well, welcome to the meeting tonight, and looking for
I make a motion to open the public hearing. Second.
we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, first on the agenda tonight, we have Article 27, Community Preservation Committee FY24 Budget Report.
Okay, I'll start by introducing myself, Michael Barrett. I am the treasurer for the Community Preservation Committee. And what I've got here is a few slides tonight that it's the budget presentation. The budget was prepared by Bill Rowe. We had talked to him in January. He prepared a preliminary budget for us. We reviewed it with the committee the beginning of February and again last night. So there are a couple minor changes that really don't affect what we're going to talk about, but we'll go through them and show them as they come up. Mark, if we can. So the outline, we've really got the components of the budget. It's made up of the annual town meeting recommended projects. We're going to take a quick look at the debt schedule as it stood as of January 2023, January 29th. And then the authorized but unissued debt schedule from which we calculate some of the expenses that show up in the budget. Then we're going to break the budget down in the budget sheet into two pieces, the funding sources and the expenditures. The two pieces combined should be familiar because it's the exact format that Bill Rowe has been using since day one with the CPC. It's just, and when we get to the last chart, you'll see it's a bit of an eye chart. So I kind of broke it up to try to keep the focus on the two individual pieces. So if we can go, Mark, to the next slide. This is the recommended projects. There are 11 recommended projects. I know there's a couple of schedules around, but a total of $2,370,100, all in cash. I'm showing here the categories in terms of the CPA categories: recreation, open space, historic. We don't have anything for housing this year, and then also the fund that they're coming out of. And you see most of it's coming out of the undesignated fund. You know the way this works, we set aside 10% into each of the funds and then we spend out of them. So there's a balance, and we'll see all that on the budget. There's a quick summary down below, breaking the $2.370 million into those categories: recreation, historic, open space, the undesignated, historic resources, and open space reserves. No need to talk about these are all on your agenda. I know one of them you talked about last night. The rest I think are on tonight's agenda, or at least most of them. So we're not going to get into the specifics, but that's just the breakdown. That's the reminder to the committee of the 11 projects that we had voted to approve. The reason the Stoughton Depot stabilization is highlighted is because that came up after our February meeting, after the budget was prepared for our February meeting, at which point we were asked by the Board of Selectmen to consider that project. We voted to approve it, so it's in here. It was a change from February to March in terms of the CPC committee, so I highlighted it for our discussion last night. Next slide, Mark. So then we have the debt schedule, just the extract. There are 15 bonds currently issued for CPA projects, total of $2,952,000. From this schedule, we see the principal and interest, and it shows us what the ending balance of those 15 bonds will be at the end of fiscal year 2024. So just a reminder to everybody of what's out there. This drives the long-term debt portion of the budget that we will see in a minute as well. But so it'll be those same numbers you see of the principal and interest combined. If we go to the next slide, Mark. In addition to those 15 bonds, we have a number of projects for which there is still some authorized and unissued debt service. So we go through those projects with Bill and decide what we need to set aside for additional interest expense that might come up in fiscal year 2024. There's a small balance remaining on the land acquisition for Glen Echo, but we don't expect anything to happen with that. But we make a provision just in case it does for the interest. There's some adjustments in this column.
If I may, ladies and gentlemen, just to better explain the Glen Echo land acquisition number, there's $73,500 there. We're required to hold that because there can be the possibility of an active conservation restriction on that property. So we cannot close that out until the town decides what they want to do as far as that goes. Once that decision is made either by the CPC or the town, then we can add that conservation restriction and close it. But it's just gonna sit there like this encumbered
until
until
it
that
happens.
happens. So, sorry.
And
Yeah, no.
if I could just clarify what Mark said, there already is a conservation restriction on most of the property at
Correct.
Glen Echo, except for 6 acres, which were reserved for active recreation.
Active,
And that's what that second conservation restriction would be for.
Apologies if I didn't clearly say that.
The good news, it would probably be a lot less than the 73,000, but, so it's there, we just make that provision. I'm sorry, what? Okay, so then there are a number of adjustments we make to those balances, and there are some footnotes at the bottom that just show that the Glen Echo Recreation Facilities is expected to be bonded in June of 2023, so we don't, I mean, it'll be picked up as a long-term debt. It wasn't on the schedule because of the cutoff of January 29th. It's still on this, but there's no interest expense associated with it. There will be in the budget. And the same with the Cape and Reynolds. The railroad station building remodeling, $320,000. This is something we want to talk about with you and explain because it's a little confusing. It came up in that preliminary budget that the bond anticipation note that's out there for the railroad station work. The original project of $350,000 was approved back in 2015, but we didn't actually acquire it and do this work until 2021 and 2022. We paid off all the bills. That note, after 2 years, we have to start paying down the principal. We can't, according to bond counsel, from what I understand, we can't yet bond that because we don't have a specific use in mind. We don't know whether it's going to be a municipal use or a different use, and that's going to affect the type of bond. So we're kind of stuck with this $320,000 sitting out there. We were going to put in a $20,000 principal payment and then have to deal with carrying that bond anticipation note till next year and the year after and see it. In our discussion, it came up that that may not be the best thing to carry on the town's balance sheet. We threw out the idea, what if we just pay it off? It's $300,000. We have the cash. We looked at various options. We actually prepared an article that was going to go to town meeting to convert it and get town meeting approval to convert it from a bond to cash. In those discussions, it came up, well, what if we just budget to pay it all off through the normal budget schedule, and we'll see how that affects. But here we've put in $320,000 at the 3.75% interest, but we're anticipating it's only going to be there for 3 months, so that's why it shows up as 0.94. It will save, from the CPC perspective, not really a big deal, the $300,000. We have the cash. Wouldn't hurt us to leave it as a bond, wouldn't hurt us to spend the cash. It will save us $12,000 a year in interest, so it's a little bit favorable to us, which we talked about last night and got a unanimous vote from the CPC to treat it this way. One concern came up. We don't want anyone to think we're trying to slip something through the cracks here. So the 320 is there to pay off the full amount of that bond, of the bond anticipation note.
And if I may, I know we're not here to talk about Article 69 in this moment. We will talk about that later. But one of the reasons we're hesitant to just dismiss that is if either Finance Committee or Town Meeting decides, you know what, we want it separated. So we have a belt and suspenders option is really why that's there right now.
The 320 would have to be here either way,
Right.
because if town meeting were to approve it as a separate article, we'd still have to have it in the budget to pay it off. So if we didn't put it here and went the other route, we would have an article saying go ahead and pay it off, but we wouldn't have a budget to pay it off with.
And if they say no to any of these, as is typical with the CPC, that money gets reverted back into our
Yeah.
fund.
So, a little complicated. We went around in a lot of circles. Again, we want to be fully transparent why we're doing it. We think it is a benefit to the town. It's got a small benefit to the CPC. Anyway, the rest of this schedule is really just calculating out $10,182 in the far column on the right as the amount of interest we're putting into the budget for the authorized and unissued estimate of debt. Next schedule, which I think gets into funding sources. And at the top of this we have, and it's the CPA commitments and abatements in the net receivable, and Bill has to file this with the state every year, and they build it in as part of their planning for what they're gonna do to do the reimbursement to the communities that have the CPA. So it's there, we monitor it every year. It shows an estimate of 970,000. That's not the actual funding source, that's just a number that we carry and the state monitors and uses for their purposes. We get into the actual funding sources. Obviously, the biggest one is the estimated surcharge. And we budgeted at 95% of the prior year actual amount, just to be conservative. We don't ever want to get into a position where we budget too much and then come up short. So that's the 843,000. The state has advised the CPA communities to budget 20% of their net receivable, which is part of the reason the receivable is up there. And that's 192,000 additional dollars. A couple of line items that are carried every year. We do get a little investment income for some of the cash balances. The town allocates whatever interest earnings to where that cash is coming from. So we get some money back every year. And then just whatever other adjustments. I mean, it's relatively small numbers. It runs between $5,000 and $10,000 a year we see in each of those lines. So the good news, total funding for the year is a little over $1 million, $1,051,259. And then what we have is the current or the projected year-end balance, fiscal 23, for the reserve accounts. For the open space, we have 126,000. Historic, we have 310. Community housing, 516, and the undesignated fund, which gets most of the money every year, and we saw that most of the projects come out of it because that's where the money is. It's got a little over $5.2 million. Nope, this is the source of money coming in before we start spending. This is the beginning balance, if you will, of our. No, it's a good question. So the next slide is the bit of the eye chart. The top 15 or 20 lines there above the shaded part, the highlighted part, are the individual line items that we saw on the long-term debt schedule. So the Glen Echo was 74,385. That will come out of the open space. That's in that second column. The other thing you see here is the allocation. I don't want to forget admin expenses. The state law allows us to set aside 5% of estimated revenues to cover our admin expenses. So we typically put it in. Bill actually rounded it at 499 he had a reason for that. Escapes me right now.
Mathematical error.
Yeah.
He said he couldn't do it at 5, but he can do it at 499.
Not sure what the .001 was going to do,
We
but
spend somewhere between 30 and 80% depending on the year. The year of COVID, we spent a lot more of our admin account because we had our administrator doing 2 essential jobs, which is why it was so much higher. I think Barry, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're generally around 30-35% of our admin.
yeah, we've never been very high.
No, and whatever we don't spend at the end of the year
Goes
gets
back
reverted
into-
back into the undesignated account.
So you see all these line items, which is the long-term debt, the same numbers that are on the earlier schedule. The highlighted ones are the ones we talked about a little bit more last night at the CPC meeting. A couple of the tweaks we had made to the budget just to add in some interest expense for the 2 bonds I mentioned, the Glen Echo and Cape and Reynolds, that weren't on the January 29th schedule but will be in place by the end of the current fiscal year. So we had to add in some interest for that. You can see the $320,000 bond anticipation note payoff is there, as well as the adjusted interest figure of $10,182. So this is, David, Mr. Lurie, to your question, this is all the expenditures, the admin, the long-term debt, all the projects, and then it carries down to the bottom to show you the ending balance of those funds. So the end of the year, we would anticipate open space having 30,000. Historic actually goes into a negative, so that probably,
No, you gotta subtract that from the starting balance.
oh yeah, the starting balance isn't in there, so that's just the ending balance of the activity. Thank you, Barry.
About 33,000.
Yeah.
Give or take.
And then that's it. I mean, that's the budget. That's, again, the format we've seen. Those are the projects. I know we're going to get into a lot of discussion on individual projects, but happy to field any questions, comments, concerns.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Do you have any questions or comments from the committee on this? Mark, you have a question?
Yeah, on, I was gonna go with page 6, I believe it is. I don't know where it is. Might be good.
The funding sources page.
What?
Okay, no, I was just letting Mark know it's the funding sources page.
Oh, yeah. On the net receivables, your estimate for 2023 and 2024 are only about,
It's
like 8, almost,
1% or something. It's a very small number, yeah.
yeah, from the year before. Is there a reason for that, or what's the?
Again, in the spirit of being very conservative, I mean, that's an early number that's provided before we get into doing the actual budget, because the state needs some information so they can start their planning cycle and figure out how much money is gonna be available for the communities. It doesn't affect what we have available to spend. It's just an early estimate of what's out there, and typically it runs below, which I think is just, again, in that spirit of,
Usually, how much is an increase? Like, how much is it from the?
well, you can see that in 2022, which is an actual number now, so when we budgeted fiscal year 2023 at 961, that was probably a 1%. So that actually looks like it might have come in lower than what they were carrying for a number. It's usually in this same trend line. But Bill presents it with all 3 years just so that we can kind of see what happened. I mean, it's been growing every year. Actually, now that you mention it, that surprises me to see that big a jump. Not that it's huge, it's $60,000-$70,000. And if that estimate comes in lower, again, it doesn't affect the funds that come into us, because it's not the surcharge we're collecting from our residents, nor is it the state funding. It's just an early tracker, if you will, for the state to use.
Let me just interrupt you for a second. For anybody who speaks or asks questions or anything, just make sure you turn on your mic. I just got the word.
I forgot, I'm sorry.
That's so the people at home can see.
No,
Here.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I know, they're like, I'm sorry. Thank you, thank you. That's all I had for questions.
Any other questions, Joel?
Yeah, I'm gonna refer to stuff I'm kind of familiar with. So under your authorized and unissued debt service. I guess this could be a little bit, oh, I'm sorry, I gotta turn this on. Thank you.
You go through that a lot, don't you?
The high school tennis court and soccer field and track lighting, you're saying we under expended by 28,918?
No, so both the tennis court, soccer field, track lighting, and the Pearl Street Park, we actually closed out last year. They were just on here from Bill. So
Yeah, but-
we think it was an error.
But no, to answer the question, yeah, that shows that we underspent the project. We didn't spend the full amount.
Well-
There was $30,000 left over on
Okay.
one and 35 on the other. When that happens, we borrow what was needed to fund the project, and the rest reverts back to the.
No, that's fine, although I gotta tell you, I'm a little surprised. Okay.
Well, you came in under budget.
No, we didn't come in under budget.
Well, from our perspective.
Well,
Well,
on
on the
our
Pearl
side-
Street, well, from your perspective, yeah, but on the Pearl Street Park, the appropriation for the high school had to throw an additional $200,000 in there to make up the shortfall.
On,
The Pearl Street Park.
I
On
was not aware of
components
that.
of
Yeah.
that, I think that was on components of that park, though, that weren't funded by the CP.
Well,
Hey.
not necessarily.
Well, I mean, I'm not familiar with the details of
Well,
it,
I'm
but
familiar with the details, so.
there are only certain things you can spend with CPA funds, and. at the
No,
end
I
of the
understand that.
project,
No,
they came
it's
to us and
it's
said-
not a big deal. I
Yeah,
was just
no.
curious, that's all. Thanks.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments from the committee on this? Dave, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, through you, Vaughn. Thank you for the presentation, appreciate it. There was, I think it's just my not hearing correctly, so I just want to make sure the page 7, it's the expenditures slide.
Yeah.
it was described as the ending balance, but the expenditures are expenditures. It's not like if you look at the undesignated, for example.
It was a mistake. Below this, on another schedule, I carry the ending
Oh, right.
balance. This is the subtotal of that.
You have a talking track that
That's what-
includes the ending balance. Okay, I get that.
Barry pointed that out to me, that I
Oh, no, okay.
got
No,
ahead of
I-
myself.
All right, so I did hear it.
No, no, you did.
No, okay. The other thing is, I think with the conversation around the 300, was it 320?
Yeah, the van.
This is easier to read here. Yeah, the confusion, I think, is the mechanics of it, because you have an operating budget, where your salaries and things, administrative things come out of. Is that what you meant when you said we would pay from it out of our budget? When and then how would the money appear in the budget to cover 320 versus an article, which would clearly come out of like a fund, like an undesignated or other fund, You know,
Exactly as it's shown here. That 320 is gonna come out of the undesignated fund, just like any of the projects that we're gonna talk about. The bottom line might be easier to read, the Stoughton Depot stabilization of.
Oh, no, I misunderstood. Yvonne, I misunderstood. There was you were looking at which way does it go? Is town meeting want to see it come out of an article? Does it prefer to see it coming out of your budget? And you said it was like a technical thing, kind of complicated. And I just wanted to understand what you meant, because you said there was like a budget approach versus an article approach to taking care of
Our
that.
original thought, when the conversation first came up, was we would put in a separate article to town meeting, which I think is out there as Article 69, to basically ask town meeting for permission to convert a $320,000 bond, or 300,000, because 20 of it would have had to been paid off no matter what. So we were going to go in and ask town meeting to convert that 300,000 that was originally approved as a bond to cash. to
And
allow
I'm
us to pay
good,
it off.
totally good on that side. Yeah, well, the reason for doing it, I get. And I'm good with.
So we were gonna do that, and when we did that, Bill came back to us and said, but we have to put it in here in the budget either way, because you gotta make a provision for the money. But once it's in the budget as being paid off, he felt we didn't need the Article 69.
Okay.
But I'm gonna stop you here. Do we want to cover Article 69 at the same time?
No, I was only saying it because I didn't know how that much money shows up in a budget that's part of the presentation now.
Mr. Chair,
why.
I would ask that you be willing as a committee
To bring it forward.
take Article 69 next out of order so we can sort of.
Tie them
I'd like to
together.
take it out of order
I'm
just
gonna-
for
You
clarification.
can do that.
Yeah.
Do you want to make a motion on it?
You don't need a motion.
They are
No,
very
you don't
related.
even need a motion.
You have it right here. that you could-
Yeah, we're going to take Article 69 out of order, take it at the same time as this, so the discussion that Mr. Laurie's bringing up is somewhat relative to this.
Absolutely.
Germane,
Yeah,
thank
I
you.
like that word. Germaine's a good word.
Okay, so do you want to cover 69 a little bit now?
Yeah, sure. If I can just give a brief history of how we got here. I was reviewing the budget that Michael and Bill Rowe, our town accountant, had prepared, and, sorry, it might not be, I know I'm loud, but, and I noticed a $20,000 line item marked ban. And I was, okay, what's this? So I called Bill and I says, what's a ban? And he says, it's a bond anticipation note. And I says, why is it here? We've never had one before. That got into a good deal of discussion with Bill, but the long story short was I said, well, okay, so we have this kind of black eye that because we don't have a usage for the building is sitting here, and it's going to continue to sit here until somebody figures out what we want to do with the building. I says, what would happen if we just paid it off? And he says, the whole thing? I says, yeah, the whole thing. Just pay the principal. You haven't bonded it yet. And he says, I don't know. Let me find out. He went to bond council and town council. They told him it would need to go back to town meeting, which was the purpose of Article 69. We presented that to the select board, which, although it created a little confusion that night, ultimately they agreed and inserted Article 69 into the warrant. The very next day, Bill called and says, I have a better idea. Day late, $1 short, but okay. As a committee, we talked about this, all 9 of us, because Michael, myself, and Barry really did the legwork on this. I felt a responsibility to the committee where they had not heard any of this until last night formally. So as a full nine-member board last night, we voted unanimously to go ahead and move forward with paying off the bond in cash. However, there was some concern that if Article 69 was needed, if something went awry, God only knows what, but for some reason, somebody said, no, you really need to separate it, we still have it there as a backup. So as much as I want to tell you all, I'm just going to dismiss Article 69. I really won't know until we approve Article 27, which is our budget.
So for clarification to the committee, we're discussing Article 69, Stoughton Depot Rehabilitation, cash payment of previously authorized bonding. Anybody have any questions on that from the committee?
I mean, because I watched you at that meeting, and I must say I was laughing because I wasn't in the room, but.
Sorry.
No, I found, I mean, basically what you have here is you approved the project. You can't put the money to anything because they haven't decided what they want to do with it. And all you want to do is convert that to cash so you can pay it off. I mean, when you boil off all the fat, that's the bottom line.
Yeah, although the money's already been spent, and that's the trick to it. That's what makes the ban complicated, or the bond anticipation note. So the town, and I had no idea about this, spends in deficit. Well, they completed and spent the money in 2021. The law requires that within 2 years' time, we either start paying the principal or bond it. When Bill went to bond it, he was told he couldn't because there was not a usage on the building. Barry, my program administrator, kind of equated it to a long-term bridge note, which nobody carries. I don't know if any of you have ever carried a bridge note, but it's the scariest thing I've ever had to do, and I don't wish to do it again. It's very expensive, and it doesn't look good on the credit report. So collectively, myself, Michael, and Barry said, look, if there's a way to pay this off, let's do that. And that was the whole purpose of this.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the committee on Article 27, Community Preservation Committee FY24 Budget Report?
Yes.
Diane?
Can you just clarify, through you, Mr. Chairman, what you just said about we spent that money? Or
Yes.
we did not? And what did we spend it on?
Rehabilitation of the railroad station. So there was some structural work that needed to be done, some roof work. The work that was done complied with what we gave the money for. So the original 350 was given at the same time as the purchase money. And it was for the stabilization of the foundation and the stonework of the building, ensuring the roof wasn't leaking, things like that. That work got done. Paul Jaffoon, at the time, was the facilities manager for the town, I believe was his technical. He completed that work. Because the town spends before they pay, and again, I had no knowledge of this. This was all new to me, but we deficit spend every year. So in 2021, the money was spent, the bills were paid. But now we need to pay the bill. That's what this 320, which is what's left, is about.
Not so much pay the bill as replenish the account.
Replenish the account.
The money came out of.
That's why he's the treasurer,
It's all
because I
within-
don't
it's all within
do
the
it well.
CPC fund.
Yes,
I mean,
But
no
you can't,
impact to any of the
you can't
town.
bond it to pay it off
can't
as a
bond it.
note because you don't have a use, so
We
you
have the cash,
you got the cash, you'll pay it off and your note is gone.
correct.
exactly how we were looking at it.
Thank you.
Any questions, comments from the
Yeah,
committee?
I have a,
Art- Dave?
I just have a comment. I just want to know where the suggestion box is so I can stuff it with what I exactly know what needs to happen with the railroad depot. So just let me know and I'll be happy to provide.
I have a circular file in my office. Bring it on in and I'll take care of that
All right,
for you.
thank you.
It constantly rotates.
Okay. Any other questions, comments from the committee? Article 27, Community Preservation Committee FY24 Budget Report. Bob, you have something?
Yeah, so on page 6, if we go through the funding sources, we start at the bottom 1051, and we go through each one of those. If we were to take those figures, is that the ending balance as far as the CPA is concerned?
In each of the accounts?
Under the reserve accounts, the open space,
Yeah.
recreation, that's the projected ending balance of fiscal 2023, so it's the opening balance, the beginning balance for fiscal 2024.
Right, okay. So if you took all of those at the end, that total figure of each one of these?
Yeah.
That's the total amount.
Yes.
Plus this year's, correct? This is the
Well,
starting
no.
point.
1051259 is this year, correct?
No, that's fiscal 24 projected.
Projections, okay. So what is the ending balance as far as what you have? Right now, it
A
looks
little
like
over $6 million.
a little over $6 million,
You
okay.
take the 5.2 and add the other 3 designated reserves.
Beautiful, that's what I want. Okay, so you got 2.3 million projected, and you got 2.1 in debt, roughly.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And as far as,
Another, to add to that, the committee's been through 2-3 times in the last 6 months, looking at how much money we had, what we were expecting. And the 6 million sounds like a lot, but we got a couple million in debt. There's probably $1 million out there of projects that have in progress but haven't been completed, cash projects. So that's gonna come off of this. And then
Yeah.
one of the key messages here that you see is we've got $1 million of new money coming in fiscal 24, but we got 2.4 million going out the door
right,
if we get everything approved.
right.
So, yeah, that 6 million is
Yeah,
not
well,
as big as it sounds.
I appreciate that, it's cash, first of all, that's number one. And as far as the long-term debt is concerned, what is that? Is that 20 years, 30 years, 25? What
They're
is
all
it?
different.
They're all different?
They vary.
Some of them are a few years. Glen Echo, I think, was the longest at 20.
Okay,
Some of them have been as few as like 5 years.
okay, beautiful. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, Dave, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a couple. One is this shows like a snapshot in time of what debt you'll have to pay. Do you have a schedule of what debt falls off over time? Is that something that could be furnished to the finance committee?
Yeah, I mean, I took the snapshot of just those columns.
Oh, no,
That
I-
schedule actually goes from 2009
Oh, it
all the way
works.
out to 2000 and,
It works for your budget, absolutely. It absolutely works the way you did it.
I know, and-
Yeah, and I'm just looking to
but
see.
yeah, that schedule's available, so we'll.
Yeah,
ask
I'd love
Bill
to see that.
Yeah,
And-
through you, Mr. Chair, that is something we get from Bill Rowe.
Okay.
Barry, do you have a running tab on that you could provide?
I do.
Okay, so
Okay.
we'll send that to the chair.
Oh, that'd be great. The
Barry's
other,
convenience.
the other thing that is a point that I think was alluded to earlier by a previous speaker through you, Vaughn, was the fact that there is no debt in any of the articles. A nice set of articles, many of which I'm sure the town's going to be pleased with, and we're not going to have to bond any of them. I think what would be great to hear is, because you've done so much research on it and you've gone out of your way to make sure that you're using cash when you can, that what is the benefit to the town? Because it's a funding source. We've always said, in the past, we've heard CPA say, we have a funding source, so who cares? But we should care, right? There's a reason why cash, when it's available for certain things, it's better to use that first before you revert to the idea of borrowing. Maybe you can share why you believe it's good for the town not to borrow.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair, in the past, the CPC always looks at their potential articles when they come and weighs the benefit of bonding versus cash. I understand that it looks like I'm a big cash spender because under my tenure, that's what we've been doing. However, it really isn't an accurate snapshot. The CPC hasn't changed their approach to things. We've merely taken a closer look at each of the articles. We have not had an article that we as a collective committee feel would be a good source for bonding during my short tenure as chair. That's not to say there won't be, and the CPC not only pays particular attention to each article, but it also pays attention to the funds that we have. And we're doing a lot of research and policy creating to ensure that future CPCs will understand when it's good to bond and when it's good to pay cash. We've just had a series of articles that have been good cash articles. The one that I think we could have theoretically bonded this year would have been the playground that you heard last night, due to its sheer size. However, looking at our overall fund balance, if everything gets approved this year with our new receivables, we're still going to have just over $4 million in reserve. we have plenty of money. So why bond something if we don't have to? It's really not a philosophical change. The committee's always looked at things this way, but I think you're seeing a different type of article coming forward at this point.
Yeah, so through you, Vaughn, the reason I brought it up is that I think one of the things that many people don't understand is that just because it's a funding source doesn't mean that the reserves that you carry in CPA are the backing of the bonds that are out. It's
No.
the town's reserves that are used as backup to your bonding.
Well,
Even though you're the source, the reserves are for future projects, not for future, backup, collateral, if you will, of those bonds. It's the town's backing of those bonds.
well, no, I
don't think
with
that's
all
true.
due
I
respect,
think-
disagree with you on that, Mr. Lurie, and you want to take this, you might
I
do
think
it better.
The way the legislation is written and the way any underwriter or analyst would look at the town's debt, I mean, there are limitations. We can only borrow up to the amount of our projected annual, our debt service can't exceed the CPA surcharge amount. We can't borrow against the state funding, the state match, because that isn't guaranteed every year, even though it's been a tremendous source of income. After this year, we will be this close to $3 million in funds that we've received in state matches since we adopted this. But any underwriter or analyst looks good. You have a dedicated source. If you go through the legislation and they talk about what would happen if you wanted to rescind, is there been efforts in this town to do so? You can't rescind it until you pay off using the CPA stream of funding. In our case, because we have the cash, if that would happen, unfortunately, we'd have enough cash to pay off everything. But that funding source coming in through this surcharge is directly tied to the debt going out. And I think that's the way the financial world looks at this. It doesn't get melded in and mixed in. In fact, having all this cash in the town's balance sheet because of the CPA is a good thing when you look at the town's balance sheet. It helps us.
Yeah, and when you look at CPAs in towns across Massachusetts, they look very favorably on the CPA because of the way the law is written. Even if it was dissolved, it won't go away until the debt is paid. So it's guaranteed funding sources. That 1.5% line item will be there until every dime that the CPA owes is paid.
Yeah, I guess then I'm just confused because it seemed like if that was the case, why don't you borrow more? Why use cash if it's
Again,
guaranteed income
we
for?
look at each of the articles,
Yeah.
and we determine, is this an article that is ideal for bonding or ideal for cash? You will notice the last couple of years, the interest rate has gone up significantly. It continues to rise. We're not in a situation right now where borrowing is favorable. So why bond something if we don't have to? We have the money.
There's a benefit to bonding, there's a benefit to cash. The
That's
market
right.
is partly driving. The prior years, before the last couple that Mark's referencing, interest rates were so low that it made a lot of sense to borrow money.
It was cheap, almost
It
free.
was so cheap, it was
free.
almost free, but, in hindsight, the railroad project that we just talked about probably should have been a cash expenditure from
Could have
day
been.
one. Yeah,
Could have been, but again, if I'm paying a 0.9% in interest, why not use somebody else's money?
John, do you have a question? Or
No,
comment?
I don't know if the confusion comes that when these articles go through, no matter how you approve it, it's still an obligation to the town.
Yes.
If something should happen or what have you. The
Through the
town,
CPC, but yes.
right, the town does take on the obligation if it needs to be. They're backing it in that fashion, but it's the CPC money that is set up. And as they said, if people didn't want to, or if it was rescinded, the account doesn't close. The account is there and you can, whatever money is in there can and will be spent. But it is a town obligation once it goes through. They guarantee it will be
it's a
paid.
town obligation, but it's
They
not an
guarantee-
obligation against the general
No,
fund.
it's just that they guarantee.
That's the
it.
difference. It's an obligation with its own funding source in the form of the
Right,
CPA
and
surcharge.
They just guarantee it will
And,
be
and
paid.
Wall Street knows how to deal with that.
Yeah.
Right. If I could, Mr. Chairman, through you, the borrowing that the CPC does through the CPA fund is through the CPA fund. It's totally dependent on revenue to the CPA fund. The town's general fund is not collateral for any borrowing that is done under the CPA. It's only under the CPA fund, and it has to be, the upper limit is that debt service cannot be more than anticipated local CPA revenue in the coming years for the life of that bond.
Do we have any other questions or comments from the committee? Article 27, Community Preservation Committee FY24 Budget Report. Hearing none. Any other questions or comments from the public? Article 27, Community Preservation Committee FY24 Budget Report. Hearing none. Any questions, comments from the committee? Article 69, which was also discussed, Stoughton Depot Rehabilitation, cash payment, previously authorized bonding. Any other questions, comments from the committee? Hearing none. Questions or comments from the public? Article 69, Stoughton Depot Rehabilitation, cash payment, previously authorized bonding. Hearing none, we're going to move to Article 28, Cape and Reynolds Dog Park and Community Gardens.
I'm going to give this over to Rich.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was excellent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of finance.
Stay with Larry. Well, I'm going to hand out, this is the hard
Oh,
copies.
I'm sorry,
of, two things.
While Rich is getting ready, I can sort of get rolling here. So we're going to Article 28, is that correct, Mr. Chair?
Yes, Article 28.
Thank you. This is an article that we made ample copies, Dave.
Yes, Article 28, Cape and Reynolds Dog Park and Community Gardens.
Yep. I was just waiting for things to settle down a little bit. This is an article for $463,000 to be paid in cash as a supplemental article for a 2015 article that was passed by town meeting for the design and construction of community gardens and a dog park. The CPC voted unanimously with an 8-0 vote on November 2nd of 2022 to approve this article. We did check that this article meets the requirements of the state CPA law, which it does. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the applicant, Rich Terry, who is the chair of the Cape and Farm Committee. Did I get that right?
It's called the Cape and Reynolds Farm Development and Use Committee.
Thank you.
So I've been chair, I'm the second chairperson of this committee. First of all, this is my first time being in front of the Finance Committee, so I know some of you, and others I've never met before, and it's really a pleasure to be here. I'm also a member of the Friends of the Cape and Reynolds Farm, as of some background. And that group was formed up in 1995 for one purpose, to make sure that the building didn't get torn down. And out of that effort, through Orrin Hanson, Howard Hanson, and Elliot Hanson, that group has survived to this day and has been able to generate some monies that have been used for specific projects at the farmhouse. And that's why I was asked to be a member of this development.
Excuse me, Mr. Terry,
Yes.
these mics are only for the broadcast? So the people in the room, there's no speakers, so could you just
Oh,
yell it to us?
You're okay.
No, the green
I'm
is
on-
okay.
okay.
There's no speakers in the room. So
Thank you.
You just have to project.
Okay, thank you.
Pretend you're talking to the kids.
Okay. Hey, Walter. So as I was saying, that the reason I was involved with the Cape and Farm back in 1995, I was asked to be involved with this Youth Development Committee. And we were granted $20,000 in 2014 to hire a consultant to come up with a concept of a dog park, a community garden, and some trails. Because Conservation Commission thought if we could get the people there for those activities, they might turn their interest towards the structures, which are old. The barn dates to late 1700s. The first part of the house dated to 1757. So there's a lot of history there, and as you know, I've been very involved with it. Our consultant, Bernie Goba, of Bernie Goba Associates, a landscape architect, put together the concept and a budget. And the budget was for $278,000 to do the construction of those three elements. including off-street parking, handicapped accessible stairways and pathways to the community garden and the dog park. Originally, the dog park was going to be under the high-tension wires because there was not much work to do other than provide some shade. Because that right-of-way is solely the right of the power company, they refused to budge. And so we had to pick another spot. And that necessitated finding a spot, and we felt that behind the barn would be the closest for everybody in terms of accessibility, particularly for those who are handicapped and want to bring their dog to a dog park. And with that budget, which was approved in 2015, the same year that the Glen Echo project was approved, we were off and running. However, the actual engineering was supposed to be done by in-house engineering department. However, they were so overburdened with the Glen Echo project and other projects that our town engineer sent a letter to the town manager saying that, unfortunately, we can't help you.
There's a copy of that
That's the
letter
letter
here.
that
Right,
just ended.
right.
Just for clarification
That's dated
purposes.
February of 2016. The actual work that the town hired out for the survey of the property had not been surveyed since, the corner by the big stone was a mark. So that had to be done, and that was hired out to a engineering firm that the town was familiar with. They did the work. They did it for $40,000, which was considered half of what the town expected. However, the credentials of this particular engineering firm came back glowing, and the town went ahead with it. Subsequently, the town hired the same group, Conoco Engineering, to do the engineering of the facilities, both in terms of pathways, the actual location of the dog park, and the community garden. During the survey, the land survey, it was realized that the wetlands were more extensive than originally anticipated during the conceptual design, and that caused the engineering department to reevaluate what we could build on. And so the footprint was reduced a little bit. Bottom line, with all the changes that came about because of the power company refusal to speak with us and the wetlands being greater than anticipated, the project got delayed and was finally approved by the planning board in 2021 after great delay. COVID has certainly had a role in it. And that bid set was submitted for bidding in April of 2022, even though we had spent a fair amount of the monies that were originally awarded at 2015 town meeting. That 278 was down to around 120,000 at this point. We got a real bid. We got real numbers. We didn't have to guess at these numbers. The low bid for the entire project was $548,000. We took that number and decided to try to rebid again in the spring of 2023. We added approximately 21% to that, deducted what we currently have left over, which is around 113,000, and we have two donations pledged. The Friends of the Cape and Reynolds Farm has pledged $50,000 to help offset some of the expenses. The Conservation Commission, who's Jerry's group, pledged $30,000. In the meantime, after much of this work had been done by the outside engineering firm, we learned of a foundation called the Stoughton Foundation, who in Massachusetts, private foundation, funds up to 10 dog parks a year for municipalities. And they will fund 90% of the hard design, concept, and construction costs, and cap it at $225,000. Even though we were late in the game finding out about this possible resource, we approached them and applied in January for this grant application. They have been extremely responsive. One of the things that the foundation requires is some unique aspects to the actual dog park, the surrounding where the fence is. They require a 5-foot high fence as opposed to the typical 4. They insist on the ground covering to be stone dust or something soft but very manageable and easy to pick up dog droppings as opposed to wood chips. Although in my research and visiting probably 14 or 15 dog parks from the city of Boston to Rentham, Other than Boston, the typical ground cover was wood chips. Their rationale is certainly valid. They also wanted things like exercise obstacles within the fenced-in area. We had planned to do that, but didn't have it on the plan. They like to see it on the plan. They had other things as well. Most of the things we did have. However, they recommended we go back to our landscape architect, Bernie Goba. Unfortunately, he passed away in August of 2022. So the Stoughton Foundation recommended 3 landscape architects that they have been working with for these projects that they have granted funding. One was in the Berkshires, that was too far to deal with. The other company was not taking any new clients. And the other one, Warner Larson out of Boston, has just finished a successful landscape concept and going forward with a dog park in Saugus. To date, over the last year and a half, the Stoughton Foundation has awarded the maximum of $225,000 to Framingham, Wareham, and I don't know what the final figure will be in Saugus. But that is their mission. Their mission is to create dog parks in the way they like to see it. So, all said and done, if we can get that embellishments to the dog park, specifically just to the dog park, to their liking, which we plan to do, and it's going to cost a little more money, about $5,500 to that landscape architect. However, that monies cannot come from town funding or CPA funding, according to appropriations and with council. So I spoke with Bill Rowe the other day on how the Friends of the Cape and Reynolds Farm could donate $5,500 for this specific task to make us more eligible to get this funding. And he suggested put a letter together, write a check, submit it to the select board. Hopefully they'll approve it. In the past, when we've made donations for specific projects, they've done the same. So we are in the process of doing that as we speak. Did I leave anything out, Barry?
I was just going to say, if I could add that we cannot budget for any grant that's been applied for, like the Stoughton Foundation, until it actually comes in. But whatever grant money is awarded gets subtracted from the amount of money that the town will pay towards the project.
Joel, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm trying to see if I got the numbers right. If I understand this correctly, the original appropriation was $278,000,
Yes, sir.
and this article was for $463,000.
Yes.
So that means the total cost of the project is now $741,000.
Incorrect. We have not spent the entire 278. There's, I think, about 113,000 or 120,000. It's in that range. It was on the budget sheets. Left.
Oh, wait a minute. The original appropriation was $278,000, and you're saying you haven't spent all of that.
That is correct.
That's-
You know what? I apologize. Your addition is correct.
$741,000.
Well, the total cost of the project.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Is there a master budget that covers everything? A detailed budget by any chance?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Do you have any questions from the committee on this here? John, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. I just want to make sure I have the numbers right. You said the Friends of Cape and Reynolds pledged 50,000,
Yes.
correct? And then the 5,500, which is going to be the donation to pick up this extra work.
Yes.
And you said the Conservation Commission had pledged 30,000,
Yes.
and that would be towards, that's in addition to the 463, or is that?
Well, we basically
Is the
said that-
463 the total, and then if anything else you come in, it's going to be taken off it?
yes.
Okay.
That's the plan. We're hoping that the Stoughton Foundation will be favorable. And in all my discussions with them so far, they seem to be, they want us to win this.
But the 50 and the 30 would also be, it would reduce this 463? Is this a matter that the 463 is there because that's what it would cost for the full project and you can't take anything else out?
Well, we had we had 548,000 come in on a bid that we couldn't.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So
And
the donation-
we added 21% to cover increased cost of goods and inflation. That brought it to 663,000 thereabouts. And I subtracted the amounts we still have left, plus the two donations,
Okay.
to arrive at the 446.
All right,
So if I may, through you, Mr.
Thank you very
Chair,
much for that
Thank you.
the
explanation.
Stanton would come off the four
That would come off.
sixty-three, but the
Yes.
30 from Concom and the 50 internally at Capen are already taken off the top end.
Right.
So to speak.
Right.
Yeah,
From the,
right.
and what was the figure you had, again, now, the total, once you went through and you gave the 21%?
The original, the quote that came in, the low bid in last April was 548 for the entire project. The off-street parking, pathways, and the community garden and the dog park. We added 21%
Right.
because with the way things were going back in April, we felt it was prudent to do that.
And that put you at 6.
658-ish.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're planning to rebid, is what you're saying?
Yes, we, in speaking with procurement, the plan is to put it out to bid again in the spring, once it passes town meeting.
Do you have to wait until next fiscal year to do that? I'm not quite sure.
We couldn't spend this money until July 1st.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So it could be bid in mid-May theoretically. But yeah, the prudent thing would be to wait until the money was,
I can think of a bunch of contractors who go, nah.
you'd probably go out June 1st. It takes roughly 30 days to get that process
All right,
rolling.
fine.
So
This, if you want.
bids would come out on the
Yeah.
1st, give or take, and,
All right.
yep.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I do have a budget, I have one copy unfortunately, but I can pass it around. This is a partial breakdown, and it shows how the figure of 463 was arrived at.
All right, great. Thank you. If you could pass it down. Is there a way that this letter that we got, can you send that digitally?
I don't see why not. Barry, can you send the letter from the
Yep.
town hall digitally to the finance
And
committee?
I have already.
Oh, it's in the packet of stuff that come in?
I sent it today.
Oh, okay. Or that's the email that
It's
came
in
in
the supplemental.
It's in the
package.
supplemental package that
Okay,
was
come
sent
in
today.
a little bit before the
You know
meeting then,
which
right?
one? Because
Okay.
I looked at all three, I didn't see it.
So we had our CPC meeting last night and then ran here, so I
Yeah.
apologize. We literally had no time.
Okay, as long as we have it, that way we can
One
put
that
it in
says
the book.
additional documents.
Okay.
That's correct, Barry, yeah. I might have that on the screen.
Yeah,
If you wanted, I could pull it up.
So, does the committee have any questions or comments on Article 28, Cape and Reynolds Dog Park Community Gardens? Bob?
As far as the approval from Stanton, that's 225, and when are they looking as far as the approval is concerned?
Well, we have first step is to have the embellishments created by the landscape architect. That's going to happen within the next 3 or 4 weeks. Once that's done, then the Stanton Foundation will, they've already looked at the entire bid set, both the PDF and the CAD CAM. So they're extraordinarily familiar with this project. Sometime, hopefully before town meeting.
Great project, best of luck.
Thank you.
Elliot, you have a question on this or comment?
I do, a quick question. Is either the Fido Foundation or the town having, or the state for that matter, have any restrictions on the wetlands area? Do you still have access, but you can't build? Tell me about that.
Yes. The engineered drawings that were produced by the outside engineering company clearly shows the 50-foot mark, the 100-foot mark, and other marks to where we cannot build. An example is where the dog park just touches, just feet away from the no-build, even though it's just a fence post. So it's very clearly defined and where the wetlands are in terms of buffer, no-build, and the other demarcations that I'm not that familiar with technically. But it's a well-written document, and it was passed by the planning board 2021.
So there's certainly no build areas. Does that mean you don't have access to it, or?
No, we have full access to it. We can walk there. Yes. The only caveat, there is a vernal pool. That's off limits to everybody for every reason, and that's way far away from the primary project.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any questions, comments? Dave, you have a question, comment? Article 28.
Yeah, thank you, Vaughn, through you. I appreciate the presentation. I'm especially glad that you're not going to be under power lines for, I would never take my dog to a dog park underneath power lines like that, like the idea. So I'm glad that it's not going to be there. That's just a comment. I didn't quite understand the concept yet, though. Is there any pictures? Like I picture like the barn, and all I know is that there's a lot of woods in back of the barn. So are you looking to like clear the trees to make room for a dog park? Because I mean, dogs like trees, but not too many trees. You know what I mean?
Yes, let me answer that. If you're looking at the barn from the front door, the barn doors, you're standing in the barnyard. Behind it, there is an area that's delimited by a nice stone wall that's been there for a couple of centuries, and it used to be part of the house garden. It has since overgrown considerably, and 2 years ago, John Linehan stopped by one of our yard sale fundraising events, and I had a preliminary draft plan. And I said, John, come on, let me show you what we're thinking about doing. And it was his feeling that this was an ideal spot because, one, it has shade. If you recall, I visited a dozen or so dog parks, and I interviewed a lot of people. And every one of them said the biggest concern they had was lack of shade. So this area that we've chosen has plenty of trees, but they are in a variety of sizes and maturity. John Linehan recommended that we remove a certain number of trees with the standard technology of breast high, a certain diameter of tree that would come down. However, save some of those trees, younger trees, for regeneration of older trees. Right now, that area has white pine, red oak, birch, black cherry, and a few others I've forgotten. But it's a very strong mix. And by removing these trees, which is part of the plan, it's in the plan, we'll have plenty of room for the dogs. We'll have plenty of shade for the dogs and the adults. And we'll have a fence inside that stone wall so that the dogs and people can't get stuck between the stone wall and the chain link fence. It's been given a lot of consideration before the Stoughton Foundation even got involved. We were very concerned about all of those elements I just mentioned.
Thank you. Through you, Vaughn. I just don't visualize it yet. So like I've been to a couple dog parks. I've been to the Sharon one. I've been to the Randolph one. Just in terms of size, just to get my head around it, in relation to Randolph, you've been to that one where you have
Yes, I have.
a nice walkway that comes up and it goes in.
Yep.
How big is this compared to that?
The Randolph one is probably a half acre in overall acreage
Right.
inside the fence.
Yeah.
Ours is about 0.35 acres.
Okay. So just shy
little
of
smaller.
that. Oh, just shy of that one. Okay.
Other dog parks that I've been to are very large, and so large that you can't see your dog over the rise of the hill.
The Hingham. That's the Hingham.
Not Hingham. It's either Rentham or down that way.
Oh.
And the concern is, and dog parks signage and rules and regulations, which the Stoughton Foundation is very keen on, says that you'll have voice command of your dog or dogs. You may have several, and keep your dog within sight. A dog park as large as the one in Rentham, you can't see your dog if he's still in the dog park, or let alone fighting with another dog. So all those aspects of the interpersonal relationships
Yeah.
of dogs has been considered by this committee.
Yeah. So there's a lot of like areas like you have walkways. Is there an interconnection pathway between the Capon and like Glen Echo?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Not
So-
yet. Well, there's not a clear town-owned properties between the two properties. Some of the land between Glen Echo and the Cape and Farm is privately owned.
It's privately owned.
Yes.
Okay.
And they're slivers. They're really odd-shaped pieces of land, because we did explore that initially.
Okay. And what about for parking? How many families could actually take their dogs?
Right now,
To be
the
able to
parking
park.
was based on the zoning bylaws of the capacity of the buildings there. And there are 10 parking spaces on the upper parking lot in the barnyard on Pleasant Street. And there are 4, I believe, down in the lower park off of Pine Street, 2 of which are designated for handicapped parking.
And then maintenance, you're going to have, obviously, you have to take care of garbage. You have to take care of plumbing for making sure water could be.
Yes.
What are some of the amenities that are?
there's water on the property, and the plan shows a water line going to the garden, the community garden, for those people who are using it, directly behind the farmhouse, and then another water line going behind the carriage shed and over to the dog park, so that water spigots will, that's the term they use, they're a low bowl, ground level for the dogs, and a high drinking spigot for the dog owners.
Okay.
So in terms of maintenance, that will be shut down, and when frost comes, it'll be cleared and winterized. And in terms of trash, it's already on the Friday pickup schedule
Okay.
as part of the neighborhood.
Okay.
And as far as maintenance of the dog park, periodically replenish the ground covering, which will probably be stone dust.
Stone dust.
Yeah.
Okay, that was going to be another question. So,
Yeah.
okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Questions or Joel, you have a question?
Actually, more of a request.
Yes, sir.
Since this went out to bid, that means there are construction documents that are available.
They are.
Okay, so I think it would be helpful to not only the members of the finance committee, but also to the town meeting, if we could see at least what it looks like in terms of the site layout drawing. We don't need the details, but at least the site layout drawing, because you've done a very good job of describing it, but it would be very helpful to actually see the plan in front of us so we know what it is that we're voting on.
Barry,
We,
do you have the construction docs currently available?
it's a pretty big file.
Yeah, I have them, yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is digital acceptable to you, Mr. Wolf?
Absolutely, because I'm trying to get a whole bunch of junk out of my place.
No problem.
Yes.
I can have Barry send that over tomorrow with some additional documents that you've already requested.
Does Fran have a copy of these?
She does.
Okay,
But you would have to.
yeah, so Fran could also send them too, so
Absolutely, if you wish to go that
up to
way.
you guys.
You
Barry,
can get them to the committee.
Barry, if you email the documents to me, I'll distribute them to the committee. And if you could also just re-email this letter, because I don't find it in the email.
Okay.
Yeah, I looked too. I couldn't
If I
find it.
didn't, I thought I did, but I
Yeah,
apologize.
yeah,
I will get
it
that
would just
to
be
you.
good to have. Any other questions or comments? John?
If you would, through you, Mr. Chair. You said this was 2015, right? Is when
That's
this
right.
was originally done. And the letter from the engineering department came in 16. It came
Yes.
almost a year later.
That's correct.
Obviously, that's a sizable amount of work that all of a sudden became needed. Can't do much about that. They have the staff can only do so much, so that it is what it is. The only thing I will say is the original proposal, I thought it was kind of foolish to be putting it in saying you're gonna go under the power lines, when I talked to the chairman at the time, and he said they hadn't even approached the utility yet. Working, as, at the time, working for utility, I said, you really think they're gonna let you go under the power lines? With their
I do too.
vegetation management, they're not gonna want anybody under there as it is, nor would I really wanna be under there, and they're not gonna take the liability on. So to me, that was kind of it wasn't ready, in my opinion, to be brought forth at that time, because I didn't think that was even a realistic shot to get that property, but.
I agree with you. I wasn't
That is-
the chair at the time, and I wasn't privy to that information at the time. So
mean,
I
that's the
agree.
way it was presented, and I just don't think, which was the reason I voted against it at the time, because I thought it was just a pipe dream. But as far as the engineering work, I can see that as quite an additional cost.
That was a big, that was a blow.
Yeah, that was a big nut.
Yeah, when I saw that, I was stunned. But the town chose to move forward and get as much done as we have
Sure,
got done.
Sure, and, no, I know people have asked, where's it gonna be? My dog will be gone by then, I'll be on my third dog by the time it comes.
Mr. Chair, if I may, through you.
But anyways, I just,
I don't think you've said anything that's wrong in your little dialogue there, but I will say that since Rich has become chair of this, and, I've interacted with Rich, I've got nothing but transparent efforts from him, and I'm very, very pleased with the hard work that Rich and that committee has put together since. Now, I can't fix the
Right,
past,
right. No, but
and I
mean,
get it,
I think
and you're
that-
not wrong.
I think the efforts are commendable.
But I want you to know that Rich has
Well,
really
I've
worked
seen-
hard on this,
I've seen a
so.
lot of Rich's efforts
Yeah.
just with the Cape and Reynolds itself, and, you know, it's appreciated, what he's done to.
Yeah.
to
Thank
keep
you.
He's
that going.
been
So-
excellent at working
And I
with us.
wouldn't expect the CPC to recommend this amount of money on top of, you know, which is a lot more than what the original one was, without, giving it due diligence and going through it, so.
This
Just
was
a
a very
point I wanted to
difficult,
make that,
yeah.
'cause you're gonna have to address that come town meeting, I'm sure, that, why? It's been so long in the making, and just,
Well,
you
to
know,
put it,
we're only here as a prep, so you're ready for town.
I understand that, but to put it in perspective, Glen Echo and the Cape and Farm project were voted yes on the same night.
I know.
But this project didn't even get looked at and feet on the ground until September of 2016. And there was nothing we could do about it as a committee.
And then they turned around and said they couldn't do the work.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm not criticizing town hall, there was a myriad of frustrations there. I don't fault Rich and the committee for moving forward with the design plans, but it certainly was not what they anticipated. And I was voting in 2015 too, and didn't expect a $750,000 dog park and community garden, but
Yeah,
can't control
let's
that.
not lose sight of the fact, it's not just the dog park.
it isn't, no. It's community gardens there.
That, you know, maybe a little more emphasis on that as well. than-
If there's any consolation, this land was a gift to the town. The town has spent very little money, relatively speaking, on the Cape and property since 1976. The Friends of Cape and Reynolds Farm have probably put in as much as the town has. So we're asking for, you know, a yes when we go to town meeting.
I'm glad to see that the Friends have offered a, you know, sizable donation as well as the Conservation Commission and the efforts going through the Stanton Foundation, and hopefully you're successful with that.
Thank you.
And like I say, I commend you with the work you've done to get to this point.
Thank you.
We have any other questions, comments from the committee? Stephanie, do you have something to say? Please identify yourself for the record. You can grab a mic, I guess.
Hi, everybody. I'm Stephanie Carrara. I live in Precinct 2. I'm no longer a Precinct 2 town meeting rep, but at the time this was going on, I was, and I reluctantly voted for it. I have a couple of questions, and I'm sorry to be the buzzkill in the room, especially when I have an article coming up. But did anyone, when we voted on this, Rich, and I don't believe you were in town meeting at the time, I could be wrong. It was going to be under the power lines, which was redonkulous, and it was no problem. You know, we're gonna get it. So town meeting, when you think about it, and everyone in the room who was a town meeting rep, we voted on a specific plan. Now the plan's changed. Did anyone talk to town council to see if where the plan has changed, where it's now going to be behind the barn and the parking's going to be different? Did anyone go to town, ask the town to see if you could talk to town council to see if that needed to go back to town meeting to get revoted? Because there was in my opinion, and I'm not an attorney, just the town clerk, in my opinion, that's a significant change being behind the barn. And I grew up on that street, so I know there's been accidents there. I know that there's been people killed there. Where this park is going, it's going to be behind someone's house directly, who lives on Pine Street. I understand it's going to be community gardens. I don't know why the gardens aren't at Glen Echo, where people can enjoy Glen Echo and Drum Rock and all that. And for you townies, if anyone knows those spots. But I think it's way too much money. And I'm no longer a town meeting member because I'm the town clerk. I want to be neutral, but I do have family in that area. And that's why I'm here tonight speaking on this. But I would like an answer to my question, if anyone can answer it, where I feel this is a significant change. Did it have to go to town council to see if it had to be revoted? Because we voted on one plan, now we have another plan. Can anyone answer that?
Do you have an answer? Oh, okay, thank you. Mark,
So through you, Mr. Chair, this has not, to my knowledge, gone before town council per se, although engineering has thoroughly reviewed this, as has the planning board. My understanding of it is that it was looked at much like the library. The scope of work has not changed here. We're still putting in the same square footage. We've moved the area, but it's still on town-owned property. If town meeting wants to see this go before council, I'm sure it will. But engineering department has approved that. The town engineering department has approved the plans the way they sit, as has the planning board. So that's, I can't speak to whether or not it should go before town council. I know all articles generally do, and they're looked at. But you remember we had some significant changes at the library, and that did not go back to town meeting for a vote.
It's just
including
something,
reduction in funding.
this is
So,
just something that I'm bringing up because we voted on one design, one amount. Now it's changing. So I'm just bringing that to everybody's attention. Not only to the board, but to the CPC because, and to Mr. Terry, who's worked diligently on it. If it's going to be, then let's do it right. Because as far as I'm concerned, I agree with Mr. Anzavino. We put the cart before the horse once again, voting on a dog park where it was underneath the power lines that we didn't even have permission for. So I'm just saying, let's cover ourselves, and maybe Mark, you can talk to maybe the town engineer and see if that needs to, it was brought up, and maybe he'll say no. Maybe you can get that in writing.
I'm happy to talk to Mark Tisdale at
Yeah.
engineering about that.
I
Thank you.
just would like to be covered as a taxpayer in the town who pays into the CPC on our bills. Thanks.
Dave, did you have a?
Yeah,
Question?
through Yvonne, to the previous speaker, I think the item to flag for the question to the town hall is, or town council, is on the 120,000 that was left over from that original appropriation. Can those dollars be used on a completely different location? Because the rest of it was sunk, right? The other 158,000?
So the original article from 2015 was for design and construction of a community garden and dog park on town-owned property at the Cape and Reynolds.
Oh, okay, so
Area.
it didn't designate an area to those.
I'll ask the question
Okay,
to
if that's-
ensure, but
Okay, if it's not tied
Yep.
to a physical location, then it's a moot point.
no
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah, it's recommended by Community Preservation Committee a sum of money for the purpose of preserving and rehabilitating the former Cape and Reynolds Farm. Is that one there? Or are we talking about C, Cape and Reynolds Farm recreational facilities?
C, I believe.
Yep, okay.
Mr. Chair. Don't hold me to that. I don't have it in front of me.
Sum
but
of
I
money
think
for
it's C.
creation and construction of landscaping and recreational facilities for the Cape and Reynolds Farm located at 760 Pleasant Street, Stoughton, consisting with the concept of Phase 1 use plan dated October 2014, prepared by B. Gober Associates and accepted. It does have an address in it, 760 Pleasant Street, if that means anything. Thank you, Dave, for the comments.
Just one more thing through you, Mr. Chairman, to the members of the CPC. Oh, okay. Okay, sorry. But what I'm saying is why I wanted that clarification is because we as town meeting members, and I was a town meeting member at the time, voted on a specific plan. Now it has changed. That's why I'm asking the question. Also, and perhaps the parking plan has changed as well, because I haven't seen the plan, so I can't speak to that. But also, did you check with DPW that I know it's on the route where on Fridays trash gets picked up? DPW now has to pick up trash. Was that discussed with DPW? Are they do they know they're going to be picking up the trash from the dog park? Like clarification, you know what I mean? I don't want that area looking like a dump. That's what I'm saying.
Through the chair, to the previous speaker, yes, that specific question came up when I met with the planning board in the summer of 21 regarding that particular question, and it was addressed in the positive by the then current superintendent of public works, that they would pick up trash on a regular day because it's going by the regular route for the other residents there. So that was addressed, and and he came back with a letter stating yes.
Oh, good. So you have that in writing.
Yes, and that was a requirement by the planning board.
Okay. That
And
because
that is part of the plan.
because I don't want that. It's to me, it's a historic place. I don't want it getting trashed, and
Me
not
too.
and crap getting left all over the place. That is a big concern.
To follow up on that, one of the questions that the planning board said, well, who's going to help out with the day-to-day stuff? And at the dog park and the community garden. Obviously, those are two different groups of people, both very passionate about what they believe in. And it's been my experience in researching dog parks, particularly, that invariably there is a volunteer group that will kind of take over. And I've already been approached by many dog lovers who say, I want to be involved, not just using it, but helping out on every Tuesdays and Wednesdays and so on, so that we have a dedicated group of volunteers that take responsibility. Kind of like the Friends of the Cape and Reynolds Farm did.
Yep.
And the same
Thank
for the
you.
community garden. There's people already that said many times, we want to be involved at the helping side, not just the use side.
Thank you.
That was discussed in terms of that, as well as what happens if someone gets injured as a volunteer. The town is covered, and that's in writing as part of the planning board acceptance.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions, comments from the committee on this? He doesn't have a microphone? There's a microphone right there. Cynthia, did you have a question or comment?
Yes. I have a power easement across my property, and that's where the sheep and the goat live, and the power company doesn't have an issue. They were there as recently as yesterday. So I don't keep raising my hand. As a town meeting representative, I appreciate how much information you put in the book. But when it comes to maps, I mean, this size matters. So for a number of these articles, 28, 29, 30, 31, 34, 36, 37, I think it would be very helpful to have good-sized maps in the cafeteria at the high school outside the auditorium so that we can see locations. Not everyone in town meeting is a townie. I'm not a townie. So folks need to know where these things are, and if there's going to be changes, for instance, the lighting and scoreboards, where are these going to be? Again, I don't want to just keep raising my hand. I don't think I said Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street. But the bigger the map, the better. And if they're available outside the hall, many people arrive early. It'll give us an opportunity to look around.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. Chairman Zamanian, would you be interested in making some sort of a map to put outside, maybe with article numbers on the map?
I am certainly happy to work with the applicants to see if we can't provide some larger maps.
Maybe one large map that
Yep.
has
No,
dots
I'll
that says
do what
you
I
are
can.
here and-
Absolutely. It's a valid point she makes. Very difficult to see on this tiny little 8.5 by 11. So we'll see what we can come up with, and I'll do my best to provide as much as we can.
Great, thank you.
No.
My concerns with this article are that it's taken so long to do this. I know that my dog has been waiting for 9
get a new
years
dog,
now. I remember when this was voted, my wife said, "Oh, this is great. We're going to be able to take Toby to the dog park," and Toby's still waiting for the dog park. We're not going to talk about that, Dave. It's beyond the scope, Dave. My other concern is that there's an awful lot of money spent thus far, and nothing's happened. That's my concern, and And going forward, I'd be concerned that it still won't happen, I guess would be my concern. Oh, yes, Barry.
Mr. Chairman, if I may address that, since Mr. Terry has been involved, this is before he was a member of the CPC. He has pushed very hard and very diligently and gone above and beyond what you would expect of a volunteer to make sure that this project does happen. So I can't comment on what's gone before in the years past, but I know that since Rich has been pushing this in the last few years, he's done everything he's could to get it forward, including coming to the CPC, getting a bid out, going to the planning board and getting that approved. There's a lot that has happened in the last couple of years that.
All right, thank you. I mean, I Mr. Terry, I definitely appreciate all that you've done on this. I know you do a lot of stuff around town, and I saw this and I thought this is great. The dog's been waiting for it.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, as diligent as Mr. Terry is, a lot of the work that the CPC has done as of late has been on creating policies to ensure these types of things don't slip through the cracks again. We now have a policy where any approved project comes back quarterly to give us updates. Barry very actively monitors those that can be closed. And we actually spoke last night about grant agreements, which is going to be an important factor moving forward as we spend more money and we allocate more grants. That policy will include a time frame, a sunset clause, if you will, on the monies. So if something was to happen like what happened to Rich, it would be up front, it would be tracked regardless of whether or not Rich is with us. On the committee. On the committee, my friend.
Thank you for the clarification.
So Rich could, my point was, Rich could retire and say, I'm done, I don't want to do this anymore, and a new guy could come in or a woman could come in, and the same process would still be followed. So there's a very clear path moving forward now transparently to ensure all articles are monitored regularly.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to mention that. Thank you, Mr. Terry, for bringing this forward. I know the dogs in town definitely appreciate it.
I hope.
Any other questions, comments from the committee? Article 28, Cape and Reynolds Dog Park and Community Gardens. Hearing none. Any other questions, comments from the public? Article 28, Cape and Reynolds Dog Park and Community Gardens. Hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Terry, for
welcome.
coming forward with this.
Pleasure meeting all of you in this forum.
Next item on the agenda, Article 29, Rehabilitation of Dennison Athletic Complex, the design phase.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is an article for $37,000 for the design phase of the rehabilitation of the Dennison Athletic Complex fields. This was voted or recommended. First of all, we went and looked at whether or not this met the requirements of the state CPA law, and it does. This was recommended as a cash article by a vote of 7-0 to approve recommendation to town meeting. And with us tonight is Matt Cashone, who is sponsoring this article. I'm going to turn it over to Matt.
Good evening, everyone. Matt Cashone, Recreation Director. Thank you guys for having me here tonight. Article 29, rehabilitation of the John W. Dennison Athletic Complex. As you see before you on this lovely map, hopefully it's large enough for everybody. Our fields are in between the Wilkins, the high school and the middle school. The athletic complex is maintained and permitted out through the recreation department. The point of this project is to bring this complex into the modern era and make it and improve it for our community. These fields are heavily used spring through fall. Softball, adult leagues, Babe Ruth baseball. We got soccer on there, flag football, which is a growing sport in this community. The high school uses it for all their games. It's always permitted out. Summertime, Stoyak does their big Smacker tournament out here. They bring in other communities. They do a big 3-day tournament. The fields, they're a little bit out of date. Since it was built around 1985, there hasn't been any major work done to it. We redid the varsity baseball field backstop about 5 or 6 years ago, and then there's some top dressing done. Other than that, there hasn't been any major improvements to this complex. We have 4 softball fields and 1 baseball field. That's a multi-use field. The infields are stone dust. If you've ever played on stone dust, it's not too great. I didn't grow up in Stoughton, but I did come. I remember playing on Dryce Field. We come up here, come play Stoughton. I strictly remember sliding headfirst in a home plate on stone dust, and I'll never do it again. It's not fun. So what this design is going to look at is pretty much our irrigation system. So our irrigation system right now covers the varsity baseball field, which is the only field with infield mix or clay, and then the 4 softball fields. The field to the left, which is next to the middle school, Dreist, which is our multi-purpose field, that doesn't have any irrigation over there. So it's going to look at if we're able to get irrigation over to that field, a well pressure, things like that. It's going to look at flipping over the stone dust into clay and ways to manage it. Another thing is all these fields, besides the varsity baseball field, they don't have dugouts as well. So we have, like I said, that big SMACA tournament in the summertime. That's 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and there's no dugouts. So there's, girls sitting there in the hot sun. So with this, if this does pass, get through town meeting, I want to work with the athletic director, all of the community groups, flag football, baseball, softball, get their opinions of what they'd like to see, and really modernize this complex for the community and make something that we're all proud of to go to. That is everything I have. Again, it's design 1 phase, $37,000, and there is a contingency built in as well. So I am happy to answer any questions that you may have.
So this is essentially a design phase for $37,000.
Correct.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the committee? Mark, you have a question?
Yes, I know a lot of individuals in the area. I know there is a high school track there, but I know a lot of individuals like to walk that out at perimeter. Is that going to remain in this design?
So it's going to be it's going to be looked at and hopefully improved. So that will be something that we'll look into, is a lot of these, because it's such a multi-use facility. Like you said, when I'm out there, people are walking their dogs around there, strollers, soccer's going out there. There's a lot of, it's more than just softball fields and baseball going out there. So it's going to look at the complex as a whole and how the community utilizes it.
Joel, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This landscape architect Activitas,
Correct.
did you go out for?
No, it was a request for, not a request for proposal, but just pretty much like a quote.
A what?
A quote.
A request for a quote.
It was a quote, yeah.
Okay, so they may not be the architect, or they will be.
No,
there.
it would have to. Any design has to go up for bid. So
Well, not for bid necessarily, but I understand. But has this gone through the procurement office yet?
yeah, Fran knows about it. This hasn't gone out for bid.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
We have a quote, I think, on this. This is part of the documents.
Yep.
The quote was
It's
given
in
us,
the email.
through you, Mr. Chair, the quote was given us so we'd have an understanding from the CPC level as to how much money this was gonna cost.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
Sure. But
So
then
that
again,
was the sole purpose from our perspective.
okay, I just wanted to make sure that, I wasn't sure whether they were going to be the architect of record or not.
No. Well, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe, but I think everybody bids on it and
Yeah.
whoever.
No, you don't really bid on it. But okay.
Do you need a copy of the quote, Joel?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
I've got it in here, yeah.
Okay. Any other
Professional services contract, so,
Goes through normal procurement.
questions or comments from the committee? Article 29. Dave, you have something?
Yeah, thank you, through you, Vaughn. I like this project a lot. I've been on those fields. They are falling apart and they are very rough to be playing on. There was also, if I remember correctly, I used to belong to a gym that they used to use the field out here, And there was like around the fence, I think there was a running track, like a stone dust. Is that in the scope at all?
Yep,
or?
yep. That's
Oh,
what Mark just
Oh,
brought
you
up.
were I'm sorry, I was so zoned in on what I was trying to think through, and you already said it was.
And he read your mind and asked
You
your
read-
question, Dave.
I apologize for bringing it up. Thank you very much for the project. I think
Thank
it's
you.
great. Okay.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Article 20. Diane?
Sorry. I know there's a set of lights on one of the fields behind the
Correct.
Wilton School. Has any discussion been about further lights, maybe at the high school baseball field, or
No further discussion.
no further discussion? Okay, thank you.
John, you have something?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Do you have any idea what this would cost to actually do all the work?
I don't. I could probably guess.
Don't guess.
I can ask. I don't know.
It's a bad idea, don't guess.
And the reason I ask is you're looking to spend $37,000 to get an idea.
Right.
And as I said to the previous presenter, we're here to help you prepare for town meeting.
Yep.
And if we can think of it here, I'm sure there's many more that are gonna be looking to say, especially with some of the things that are coming up. If you want us to spend $37,000 now just to get an idea, what are we looking at? Is it a $500,000 project, or is it, just to have some order of magnitude, I think would be good for your presentation.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I would agree with you. Myself and Matt did kick around some numbers, but there's just too many variables. For instance, with the irrigation system, a well dig can cost, there's a pretty good range there. I think Matt could safely come up with a number to take the stone dust out of the diamonds and replace that. Things like that are simple, but this is a complex enough project where we did not feel comfortable throwing a number at it per se. And I would like to draw your attention to one of our upcoming articles that we went through the same thing, and that was the purchase of the Atkinson Ave extension property. We knew what we wanted to do there, but we weren't able to get definitive numbers. Now, obviously, it's back, so we have those definitive numbers. I'm in a very similar position with this. I'm not comfortable with Matt sort of taking a guesstimate at it, because particularly given our economic situation in this country, that's dangerous. And that's why I kind of stopped him and said, don't guess. Because we've had discussions, but we may not even be close, so.
Dave, you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just a quick one, a follow-up to the previous speaker is that if they finish the design and it turns out it is very, very expensive, let's just assume, assuming the worst, can it be done in phases, and can the design have enough shelf life to live out a phased-in project?
So that's a great question through you, Mr. Chair. That would be something I think both the CPC and Recreation would have to discuss. How would we choose to phase it? Is it a project worth phasing? What is the financial position of the CPC at that time? Things like that. This is a town-owned complex. It's not a leased complex. So I think there's a greater vested interest. But again, this is, from our perspective, a little bit of money to get a much larger and distinct picture as to what we want to do, which is why we decided to proceed this way.
All right, thank you. Any other questions, comments from the committee?
Dave, we could theoretically phase it. It would be up to the CPC and Recreation.
I like the project, and my sons both went through there, and absolutely, not a fun field to play on.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Article 29, rehabilitation, Dennison Athletic Complex design phase. Hearing none. Any questions or comments from the public? Article 29, rehabilitation of Dennison Athletic Complex design phase. Hearing none, move to Article 30, which is next on the agenda. Article 30, lighting and scoreboards for Miller, O'Day, and Goff Field.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tonight, we have with us Heather Tropey, the president of the Stoughton Youth Baseball Association, I guess. Stoughton Youth Baseball. So we were approached for Sorry, I got a lot of things going on here. A request for $145,000 for evening lights at the back field of the Miller Complex. On September 28th, 2022, the CPC took a vote of 5-1 to approve this project. Full transparency, the one vote was myself, and I voted no because I was concerned that the town, it's my belief that the CPC has a fiduciary responsibility to ensure when we invest money in the community that two things happen. A, there's a community benefit, and B, that the money can actually be used and the item we're purchasing can be used. At the time, the select board had a motion attached to this which would have required Stoughton Youth Baseball to return every April to get permission to turn the lights on. I felt that where at least two members every year of the select board are changed, except for our third year, it was entirely possible you could get 3 people on the select board that hate baseball and choose not to turn the light on. And I know that sounds a little blunt, but my concern was, are we investing in something that may never happen? Since that time, since our vote in September, the select board have voted to remove that stipulation and instead allow the public to come directly to the select board when and if there was ever a problem. I wanted, for full transparency, to make sure everybody knew I didn't hate baseball. I just had a concern about fiduciary responsibilities. Okay. Yeah, they did on February 7th. That's correct. So with that said, Heather just came to us as the president. I didn't even honestly know she was the president until last night when somebody whispered in my ear. So, and Heather had no information on this until tonight. So I would like Barry to take a brief moment to sort of give a brief presentation of the project, and then we'll kind of field any questions. Are you prepared for that, Barry?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Liz Giordano, I'm Precinct 2 Town Meeting Rep. I'm also a Stoughton Youth Baseball Board member, and for full transparency, I'm the president of the Flag Football Board that uses that field that they just talked about.
Thank you.
Sure.
I didn't want to ignore you.
Thank you. There's 2 parts to this project. One is to install lighting on Miller Field in the Elm Street complex, where lighting doesn't currently exist. In the league that Stoughton Youth Baseball plays, I'm not sure if it's all, but at least most of the other towns have lighted fields. This would only be for tournament play in June and July. And given that Stoughton doesn't have lights, it makes scheduling more difficult. And again, it's only intended to be just for the tournament playoffs and tournament in June and July. Stoughton Youth Baseball will be responsible for paying for the utility bills for the electricity. And once they're constructed, hopefully they'll be able to play by next June. The other part of the project is to replace 2 existing scoreboards at O'Day and Goff Field, which are also in the same complex. The scoreboards there are old, obsolete, and worn out, and so the plan is to replace them with new electronic scoreboards.
If I may, Miller Field, if you're familiar with the complex, there's 6 fields at Stoughton Youth Baseball. Miller Field is the center field. And it sits a little bit lower than the other fields that are up higher at the front of the complex. So at the time, when the decision was made, and again, coming into this, this year, new in this position on the board, wasn't part of the subcommittee that sort of wrote the grant and approached CPC for the funding and all of that. But I think the thought at the time, and what I do agree with, is that this field, the lighting would have like the least amount of impact to the neighborhood, the neighbors abutting, because it sits a little bit lower. And then again, the scoreboard, just to reiterate, I could just share that my own boys play down there. There's nothing better than go to a ballpark and being able to see the score on the board, especially around playoffs and championships. And at SYB, they don't work, and when they do, they're shoddy at best. in case you don't know, SYB is actually celebrating 70 years. So I think that's pretty incredible. This organization has existed this long, especially when baseball, the greatest pastime there is sort of a dying sport, as they say. We're looking really excited about this opportunity. Our numbers are up this year. We've seen a significant increase, which is really exciting. So this idea of being able to offer night games is really something we're looking forward to.
Just to add on to that, because these would only be used in June and July for evening games, you're looking at from probably 8 to 9:15 p.m. they'd be over. The lights would be off, so wouldn't be that large.
And as part of, I'm sorry, were you
That's
finished?
okay. Yeah, I was
As part of the original license agreement the select board had with the SYB, it did not allow for lights. So that license agreement had to be modified and was modified with the specifics about the playoffs with a mandate to shut them off at 10 p.m.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Any questions, comments from the committee? Joel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mark, I'm looking at the application. There's no dollar value on it. What's the dollar value? Oh, okay. All right.
should
The one
be.
that was sent electronically didn't have it. Okay.
It's 130,431
See,
and
Eric
40.
came in at the last minute and showed it to me.
We recommended $145,000 in cash.
145,000, and that covers, what does that cover? Design,
The lighting.
construction?
Yeah, so the SYB had a landscape designer or a lighting designer already design the lights as part of it. It came to me as part of the package, Joel. I can't tell you, but and it also came with an estimate as to what the cost of this would be, which is what we base this on.
If I understand this correctly, the town will go out and procure the services of either an engineer or a landscape architect, or that's not necessary?
So the applicant is a private applicant. It is not the town that's applying for these funds. So we will have a grant agreement with them, but they can use those funds. As far as I know, Barry, correct me if I'm wrong, but they can choose their person to do this.
Oh,
Am I
okay, so
correct?
basically it's not going to the town.
No, it is not.
Oh, okay, well, that answers a lot of questions.
Yep.
Okay.
And it is town-owned property, but through their license agreement, if we choose to recommend this at town meeting, or to approve this at town meeting rather, then they'll be free to hire their people to do the work.
All right, so I can assume that the third party will also be responsible for maintenance and replacement?
The SYB will be
That's what I mean,
responsible. Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
So the town will not be responsible for cleanup. They won't have to go there and pick up trash.
That is
And
correct.
everything will be done by the third party, is like.
As it is now, yes.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
You're very welcome, Joel.
Liz would like
Yeah,
to add
just to
something.
add on to that, there is no design phase. We're ready. We're ready to
Right.
put the lights in. They could go in after July 1st.
The lighting design that you'll find that in the package there, Joel.
Well, there's a breakdown, but I wouldn't call it a lighting design.
What we received, there was lumens and.
I can speak to that a little bit.
Please.
Because we're chartered by the Cal Ripken League and Babe Ruth, there's actually certain requirements certain materials that we have to use through our charter as it pertains to safety in terms of weather conditions, like thunderstorms and so on and so forth. So we actually have to be very specific in the materials that we choose if we want to be in compliance under our charter.
Well, no, that's fine. As long as the town isn't involved and they don't accept any liability for the design, fine.
The liability falls directly to SYB.
I'm done.
And I will say that one of our members at the CPC had some real concerns about light pollution, and that was talked about pretty thoroughly at our meeting, and that person was satisfied with the answers he got.
Well, does this have to go before the planning board?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't have an answer for that, Joel. I can find out.
Well, it might not be a bad idea.
I'll find out.
Laura, do you have a question, a comment?
I do. And sorry if I missed this. Did you say that the intent is to use these lights only in June and July?
So yeah, so our season begins on April 22nd. So that's the regular spring season, and then we get into playoffs and championship games in June. And then what happens is Stoughton has hosted for the last, actually, I think we're in our 23rd or 24th year, a large tournament where towns from all over come to our complex for 3 straight weeks in a row. 3 straight weekends in a row, which goes from late June into July. So our hope is that we can use the lights for those tournaments.
I was just thinking if we were going to be putting the lights in, and June and July tend to be longer days, are there shorter days that we might also want to be using the lights in, say, the spring or late spring or fall? Not that
I'll be
early.
honest, it's a valid point. One I thought, again, not having been part of the initial planning for this, absolutely. I think it's something that we can talk further through in terms of maybe making an amendment there if need be, or what may the process be. I don't want to overspeak.
I mean, why limit yourself if we're going to go through doing that, unless there was some sort of other limitation that I'm not
There was
clear on.
concern about the lighting impacting the neighborhood, which is, I think, why the decision was made to use that, particularly during playoffs. And my understanding, at least from what we heard at the CPC, was that that was the time they were most in need. Those are games that can run a little bit later, and they often run out of daylight, which is problematic in a baseball game. So
Yeah, just thinking earlier, then those lights would be on earlier in the day as well. So just because it's getting dark earlier, and if it is in the field, that's kind of the more central field and having less of an impact. It's just, why limit yourself to those 2 months when we might have benefit to a greater period of time with having lights on those fields?
I can only tell you that the select board entered into that agreement with SYB, so they'd have to work through that if they wanted to change it.
You good? All right. Any other question? Eric, you have a question?
Thank you. Just a brief one. I was just curious if we have any idea of lifespan of the equipment you'd be installing.
Barry, do you remember what the lifespan was on this project?
Joel says 25 years. He's done this before.
Thank you, Joel.
We'll take Joe's professional opinion on that one. I know I have the numbers, but I don't have them in front of me. I'm sorry.
Plan for when I've done schools, for example, when we do lights for fields and things of that nature, typically we go for 25 years full replacement.
So the
Regular school building, which is built for 50 years.
Thank
So
you,
they'll
Joe.
be asking for the
John.
replacement on their 100th anniversary.
John, do you have a question or comment?
Well, the good thing with that is they're only using them 2 months a year for weekends, so I would expect that the lifespan's gonna be a while unless somebody hits them, or shoots them out.
Would be kind of fun to watch.
I was going to say, in which case we will absolutely
But the,
embrace that.
if you're not familiar with the complex, that Miller Field is and it's in the middle of the woods, and these lights will be facing towards the woods because, the way the field is situated, the lights would be from the outfield in, and you're gonna be facing in towards the woods, so the light shouldn't really bother anyone around there. They would have plenty of shielding from the lights from that field, and I know I spent many years down there, so I'm glad to see the progress on that. And being involved with those way back,
Yeah.
it was a great treat for the kids when we went down to Braintree and would play under the lights, and they thought it was fantastic. So it's nice. It is nice for them to get them, and I fully support this. I'm glad the CPC saw the goodness in this. And I wish you all the best. Good to see you. I'm glad you
Thank you,
reached
John.
out.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Any other questions, comments from the committee? Article 30, lighting and scoreboards for Miller, O'Day, and Goff Field.
Could you just say your name again, slowly, because
Yes.
our secretary's recording, she's watching, just so she can get the.
Sure. Liz Giordano.
Thank you very much.
You do have a comment. Okay, Diane.
I'm very much in favor of this. I spent, I want to say, the best 7 years of my life on the Stoughton Little League Board of Directors. And I won't take personal offense, but I was there when the original scoreboards went up. And I know they're outdated and whatever. They were also donated to us by Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola actually donated those scoreboards years ago. I think my one question is, and I appreciate that it's the Miller Field. I know exactly where that is. Myself and another person ran the cook shack for a good amount of those years. Has any of the neighbors reached out, or have you reached out to them to tell them that, you know, this is happening? I would assume.
Yeah, so I could tell you that the subcommittee previous did their due diligence in reaching out to all of the neighbors surrounding on Elm School and actually West.
Yeah, and I was going to take
truly
that
support
because
this, yes.
Heather wasn't involved on this level then. They did send out notices to the neighbors. We got some response. It was a small response from the neighbors. Generally, most of it positive. There was one negative concern. Really, it wasn't necessarily negative. It was a concern. And that was heard both by us and by the select board. So it was pretty well vetted through the neighborhood. Now, that's not to say somebody won't, once they go up, say, I don't like lights, but.
Speaking as an individual that grew up on Elm Street, I will share that historically SYB has had a really great relationship with the neighbors on Elm Street. Has there been things through the years? Of course, organically, I think as the program has grown, traffic flow and so on and so forth. But I think, you know, speaking as a person who grew up on Elm Street and also who is a fierce advocate for this league, we are very much committed to maintaining healthy relationships and diplomatic relationships and friendly relationships with the neighbors, specifically, you know, all the abutters, but specifically Elm Street as they're the most impacted with the traffic flow and things like that. So we will take great care and concern to make sure that when the lights go in, assuming all goes well, that our neighbors are you know, their voices are heard.
Okay.
This is just kind of a, what is your maiden name? Is it Payne?
Yes.
It is Payne, isn't it? And I remember your brother so well. Visited me often at that shack.
Mom is still there.
I want to say,
any other-
you know, the CPC has had months to work on this. Heather literally got this information when I walked in here tonight. So I want to give Heather a lot of credit for how knowledgeable she is about what's going on and how well she's done before you tonight. And I'm sure she'll be better even prepared for town meeting, but should be noted.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Public.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Article 30, lighting and scoreboards for Miller, O'Day, and Goff Field. Hearing none. Any other questions, comments from the public? Article 30, lighting and scoreboards for Miller, O'Day, and Goff Field. Hearing none. Thank you very much. Nice to meet you, Heather and Liz. Thank you. You did excellent. Have a great night. We're going to go to the next item agenda, Article 31, renovation of Marksfield design phase.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Article 31 came to us through Stolax, which is the lacrosse operation here in Stoughton that has the license agreement on Marks Field. Mike Tupin, the president of that association, brought this to us. We checked, and this meets the requirements of the CPA law. And we recommended $12,600 in cash on November 2nd of 2022 by a vote of 8-0. This was another project that we looked at. Do we do design and construction or just design? There was a significant enough conceptual change where we chose to move forward with design first and then get the numbers for construction. With that, I will turn it over to Mike.
So what was the dollar amount? I just want to be clear on it.
$12,600.
$12,000. Okay, great.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And that was cash. Did I mention that was cash?
Hi, good evening. I'm Mike Tupin, 12 Atherton Street, president of Stoughton Youth Lacrosse. Marks Field is on the corner of Spring Street and Blackstone Street over by the Gibbons Elementary School. It used to be an old softball field, and it really needs some work. The field is uneven, and it needs some help. So we're looking to get the design phase so that we can level the field, put some grass and irrigation in, get the fencing fixed, increase our parking area to get them off the street, so that we can play games there.
And if I might just add to that, when Mike reached out to us, I actually walked the field with him, tripped a couple of times myself in a good pair of work boots. It was pretty obvious the field was in desperate need. I wouldn't play lacrosse there. I was afraid to walk on it, to be honest. One of the concerns that Mike and myself talked about were the influx of cars during games and how that affects the people who live there. There is an area that parking can be accommodated on a much better scale than it is currently. So we want to look at the parking as something that we can get off the street, make the neighbors happier. At the end of the day, this will be a nice field for the neighbors to use themselves too when it's done, when games aren't being played. So I just sort of wanted to give you a rounded view of that. And we're happy to answer questions.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. I'm familiar with the field. I've been there before. Joel, you have a question?
Of course.
Is this a third-party grant, Mark?
You mean, are we going to grant the money directly to Stolex? Yes.
Yes, okay. And so it's a similar situation to the prior
It
one?
is.
And is this for preliminary design or is this for final design? Because for $12,600, you're not going to get a big final design.
So we received an estimate for design from the same company, Activitas, and that is what we based this grant
But
on.
is it, the other design was a preliminary design, getting ready so that you go out and get...
Much bigger complex than Marks Field. You're talking about the Denison complex? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a much larger complex than this.
So the 12,600 is for what? Construction documents, design
It
documents?
would be for design. We would need to get construction documents after that.
After that. Okay,
Yes.
you answered
Yep.
the question.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
But we need to know what the concept is, and that's what, yeah, got it.
Any other questions? Mark, you have a question?
Yes, I actually have two, and I don't know if this was thought of or if it can be thought of in the design phase. Where it is a dead-end road and it's not very wide and all, I know you're talking about parking and everything. What about emergency access due to it being a sport that may need
Certainly
emergencies?
something that should be thought of, Mark, yes.
But it's just an odd spot to get in, get out of. So that, I believe, should be involved into the design of this complex. And then you kind of touched on it where lacrosse is only a certain amount of time. What are the design aspects that are going to go into it for like multi-use for the other times that you guys aren't using the field? Or is it just going to be a lacrosse field and that's it?
I'm sorry, are you talking about what are some of the other uses that could?
Yes, what are going to be
They
some
would
of the
be
other
very
uses?
organic uses. People could picnic there, they could walk in the field, let their dogs run, I'm sure, things like that. There's no formal secondary use for it, to my knowledge, at this time. But it would be certainly something I think we'd all be open to hearing. It is town property, and although Stolax owns a license to it, when there's no games, I think it would be great for the town to be able to utilize it, so.
Especially, right from out of the center right there. They
Absolutely.
could definitely utilize that
Yep.
area. It's a nice little park. So,
Agreed.
thank you.
Any other questions, comments on Article 31, renovation of Marks Field design phase? Elliot.
One thing I heard actually in several places here is, the people can use them to walk the dog. And what, when people walk their dogs, that's a euphemism. And I wonder, you want the people to be able to use the park, all of it, except you don't want the after effects of walking the dog. I mean, do you put up signs or something that says, please pick up no dog following, curb your dog, or whatever you have euphemism
I think signs would be appropriate, and I would suggest bringing single-use bags with you to pick that up if you. Sorry, I had to throw it in there.
It's a profit center, $50.
I'll sell them.
Thank you, Elliot. Now, Dave, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, for the previous speaker, on the topic of the season, I think just to close the loop, what is the season? I mean, is it 4 weeks, 10 weeks? What do we?
We start practice in March and we conclude end of June, early July.
Perfect, thank you.
You welcome.
Any other questions? Joel, you have a question, comment?
Just a comment. Once again, it would be helpful if the electronic version that I have of this article doesn't have the estimate in it from the landscape architect.
Could you please email that over?
We'll make sure that gets to you. That was an oversight,
Well,
Joel. Yes, of course, directly
And
to
would
the
also
chair.
be helpful for a site plan, like the last project. That was very helpful, so you can see,
Okay, gotcha. Yep,
because this is going to be asked at town meeting.
absolutely.
Yeah, email it over. I'll distribute it to the committee, and we can make sure it gets in the book, too.
It was an oversight. Thank you for pointing it out.
Any other questions, comments from the committee on this? I'm familiar with the field. I've been down there before. Some of my daughters play lacrosse. Yeah, I don't walk the dog that far. Yeah, but I've been to the field before, and leveling, I think, would probably be a great idea. It's definitely a hazard, might be a nice word, playing lacrosse. So. Rough's a nice word, too. Any other questions, comments from the committee? Article 31, renovation of Marksfield design phase. Hearing none. Questions and comments from the public. Article 31, renovation of Marksfield design phase. Hearing none. Thank you very much for the presentation, Mike. Tupin, is that correct?
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike Tupin. We're going to move to Article 32. We're going to move to Article 32, office storage equipment for the Old Stoughton Music Society.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an article that was brought to us by the Old Stoughton Music Society. They have a need for storage equipment to store some of the older documents that they have, music sheets, things like that. I'll let Renee LeBlanc fill you in on the details. This falls into the category of historic preservation and does meet the requirements of the CPA law on a state level. And the CPC recommended on September 7th of 2022 by a vote of 8-0 to recommend $7,500 in cash.
Thank you for the clarification.
And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Renee LeBlanc. Renee?
Hi, I'm Renee LeBlanc, and Ed, are you still? Yeah, you come up here too. And we've got the president of our board, Ed Quigley, with me. We have been in a little room down in the basement of the Clap building for a very long time. It's actually part of the agreement, I believe, is that we're required to at least have a room there. And we do have a room there. But the Historical Society obviously is a organization with much more stuff. So we're in a small little room, and over the years we've acquired more and more music, we've acquired more and more things. We've got a lot of historical information there. We've got membership records that were hand typed out on, you remember those old typewriters, clack, 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 from over 100 years ago that are there. At this point, many of the filing cabinets that are there are not in great shape. A couple of them are held together with Scotch tape. There's a couple of drawers that we can't use anymore because they're just not functioning. We've got a big old teacher's desk in there that is way too big for the room. It was great when Betty Moralia was there almost every day and she was typing stuff out and sending notes to members. That's not the case anymore. We're there, I don't know, sometimes we're there every week. We've been going through cataloging, but at this point, what we're dealing with is a bunch of old filing cabinets and a bunch of things that are in cardboard boxes. Yeah, thank you. Cardboard boxes with old music in it. And they're on an unfinished cement floor.
just to raise your hair a little bit more. So some of these things are starting to get damaged. The cardboard boxes, of course, because it's on unfinished cement, are starting to pick up moisture. It's difficult to find things because we tried to take out some of the music we don't use as often, but we tend to go back to things. So we're running into this terrible storage issue of old music that really should be preserved. We are 237 years old. We've given an event every year since 1786. One of our directors' names was E.A. Jones, the school that we're in, who designed our town seal. We went to the 1893 Chicago World Fair and had the Canadians up in Toronto. Yeah, we did. Well, there may be a couple of members with us that might have gone.
I almost went.
But yeah, the organization went up there and actually had the Canadians singing the Star Spangled Banner and God Bless America at one of the train stations. It's a group that's been around for a very long time. They've given a lot to the town. We operate on a shoestring budget. We have not asked any money from you folks before, ever, to my knowledge, or at least not in the past 20 years that I've been involved with the group. And generally we're self-funding. However, we really need some help with our storage, and there's stuff there that really needs to be preserved. It's of historical interest.
Well, thank you very much for the explanation. Any questions? Eric, you have a question.
Hi. First, Renee, I'm remembering that at one point you did send me a Facebook message asking if I could at some time play for the organization, and I'm realizing I never got back to you.
You didn't.
So I just, in the interest of transparency, want to apologize in public for never replying to your message. That was really tacky. I've actually been wondering, how many members do you currently have?
Right now we have about 22 members. We were down to, I think, about 12 or 14 members before COVID.
Yeah.
And then COVID came around and we were down to about 8 members, but we actually did give things during COVID. We've made it through World War II, World War I. We've made it through the Spanish flu. We made it through the Civil War, and we have made it through COVID-19 so far. And as soon as it abated, a lot of people came out of the woodwork. So we've got a very younger choir than we had before. It's turned over a lot, and that's exciting actually to see people excited with it. Due to some of my health issues, we've had to cancel some concerts. We had to cancel our fall concert, but what we did instead is we went to the Copley, we went to Charlwell and New Pond, all nursing rehabilitation homes, and offered Christmas caroling. And actually this year, because I wasn't prepared to do a full spring season, we are singing at the town meeting. We're singing the national anthem, Chester and God Bless America on the first night, and national anthem and Battle Hymn of the Republic. So you'll actually get to hear us.
That's excellent.
Nice, very nice.
The only question I would have is kind of related to some of the other projects that have come up where we've asked for additional, like the actual quote for like the last field project, for instance. It would be helpful, I think, to see what the actual, because I know the application mentions quotes from a local, office supply store, and they just sort of like glancing at staples.com. I just started getting my own sense of the price of these kind of cabinets. It did seem a little steep, so I think it would just be useful to have that document.
I do want to, all right, so first of all, we're looking for 5-drawer cabinets.
Yeah.
Which are much more expensive than 4-drawer cabinets. If this was 4-drawer cabinets, I would not be here because there have been numerous places that have cabinets that they would be happy to donate. Because we can't go out, we have to go up. I've had a long conversation with Dwight, and he cannot afford any more space. And I understand because I'm there. He really cannot afford any more space. So we have to go to 5-drawer cabinets, which are far more expensive, unfortunately. I tried to look for a way to like put cardboard boxes and then 2 drawers out on top of that, but it's just not safe. My librarian is shorter than I am, so I don't really want to put her on too high of a step stool. That wouldn't be cool.
And listen, as somebody who's cataloged plenty of music, I totally sympathize. So
Yeah.
want you to have the equipment you need. I just think it'll be helpful to have that supporting documentation.
Yeah, and I
just
did
to
actually
see the price breakdown.
I talked to somebody about the town clerk actually, whatever, put me in touch with.
Yeah, so when we were looking at this, we Renee was doing some online research. We asked that she go and speak to Fran or Bill Rowe and make sure that they were comfortable with the overall number, that it would be enough to cover it. I believe it was Fran that said, yeah, you've got enough money here, so.
She put me in touch with the contact for the town that orders office supplies.
It was WB Mason, yeah.
right,
And I was
okay.
just concerned that, I might find something on Staples inexpensively, but WB might be 3 times the cost. Yeah, yeah. So we felt it prudent to double check that. I don't have the estimate. That would be something. Yeah. So make a note of that, Barry. Yeah.
I just feel like every time, anytime we have hard numbers to present, it makes
I
it a little
agree.
easier. That's all.
Certainly.
Yeah, but this is great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Eric, we have any other questions? John, you have a question?
Mr. Kumar, I think it's great you're going through this to get this, and it's well worth preserving. And, there are 5-drawer cabinets, and there are 5-drawer cabinets. So, you're going through the expense. You want to get something that's going to last and protect the run.
Yes.
Let's not forget, we did have water in that building not all that long ago where they
Correct.
were looking at damage.
4
So,
years.
yeah, we do want to make sure that what you get is sufficient to protect these documents. And you probably just missed that trip there.
Other questions, comments? Dave, you have something?
Yeah, so does Elliot as well. Thank you, Vaughn, through you. Thank you very much, Renee, because I'm going to speak a little bit out of turn, is that I look forward to seeing your performance, the Music Society at the Railroad Depot during our 300th anniversary. And I hope we can see that come to a reality. So putting that aside, I just had a question. We have in our library an archive room. Are any of your Music Society documents being preserved in the archive room?
Not that I'm aware of.
Is it out of space where we can't?
If I may, through you, Mr. Chair, I happen to be over there. The Redevelopment Authority has some hand-drawn photographs, sketches on loan from the Historical Society, and they were being kept over there. Mr. McGee is clearly out of room.
Yes.
It would be ideal to where that is an environment-controlled situation. It would be wonderful to have access to that space. He would happily give it if he had the room, but he's stuffed. I
Yeah,
mean,
but it's just
he's
that
pretty
some of
loaded.
this stuff is such a
Yeah.
treasure, and I'm sure against many of the things that we're already archiving, I'm sure this stacks up pretty important against what we already do.
If we get this and we're putting things in, anything that we come across, because there are a couple of cabinets that I have not opened except for once or twice because they have some of the older stuff there, and I just wanted to leave them. We do have a member that has some archival experience at this point, so when it comes time to actually move stuff around and look at stuff, if there's stuff that's, and there probably are a couple of pieces that really should be archived in an archival room, I will ask about that at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Elliot, you have a question, comment?
Just a quick question here. Now, is the Old Stoughton Musical Society the second oldest or the oldest one in the country?
We are the oldest one in the country, oldest continuously operating musical society. We're in the Guinness World Book of Records, and I guess apparently, and I wasn't aware of this, colleges and universities now consider that our background, although our organizing documents go back to November 11th, 1786, there was the Musical Society of Stoughton before that went back to 1762, which had 90% of the same members. So apparently universities now consider that to be the roots of the Old Stoughton Musical Society. We were the Stoughton Musical Society until 1908 when we incorporated and it became the Old Stoughton Musical Society.
So you got older.
Apparently.
Isn't that old?
I say we were organized in 1786 with roots that go back to 62.
Well, trust me, time catches up with all of us, especially me.
Thank you, Elliot. Any other questions, comments from the committee? Article 32, office storage equipment for the Old Stoughton Music Society. I myself think it's great. I mean, oldest music society in the country, and we need to preserve this music. So, Just my own personal view on the thing. Any questions or comments from the public? Article 32, office storage equipment for the Old Stoughton Music Society. Hearing none. Thank you very much, Renee.
Thank you.
Have a great, and Ed, thank you. We're going to move to the next item agenda, next article, 33, preservation of town Stoughton vital records.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Article 33 was brought to us by the town clerk, Stephanie Carrera. This is a continuation of a much older article that was given to a town clerk some clerks ago, and it was never acted on. We checked, and this does meet the requirements of the CPA state law, and it falls under the category of historical preservation. This was voted by the committee on September 28th, 2022, by a vote of 7-0, and the amount recommended is $35,000 in cash. I'm
Thank you for the
enjoying saying that. You could probably pick up on that.
Say it was cash.
It was cash.
Thank you.
With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie, who came to us with her needs, and we have recommended this article. Steph?
Thank you, Mr. Zemanian. Stephanie Carrara, Town Clerk. I'm sorry, Stephanie Carrara, Town Clerk, for those of you who don't know me. I appreciate what the CPC increasing their dollar amount that they've given to me. And Mr. Zemanian was correct. It started 2 town clerks ago, many, many moons ago in the early 2000s, and the money just sat there. And Dwight McCarron brought it to our previous town clerk and then brought it to me, and I said, I want to act on it. I got one quote so far, and I've given that to you by a company name of CoFile. I emailed that over to Mr. Enochian. What they're going to, if this is the vendor that we go with, they do it in stages. And I actually wanted to see what their work was like. So what I did was, we have a line in my budget for binding. So I took 3 street listings and had them bound by this company, and they did a phenomenal job. They also put the information on the outside, so we don't have to like tape a piece of paper to it and put, what it is. And the quality of work was I thought was great. But I want to work with procurement on this, because I don't want to supersede procurement and just get the 3 quotes and then just say, hey, I did it. And, I want to do it the proper steps. But I did ask this company, CoFile, for a quote, and they broke it down. And the gentleman came out, and the person that I was working with, he retired. So the person that took his spot, Carolyn, I don't want to butcher her last name, came out, and she redid everything that he did, took pictures of the books and whatnot. And what I did was, for you today, I brought this book. I took it out of the vault. This book is just from 1944. We use it all the time. Once we get the books and all the records in order, I will be doing something, hopefully, in our 5-year plan with Laserfiche, and getting stuff all scanned in so that we don't have to keep touching these books and wrecking them. But if you have any questions for me.
Okay, thank you very much for the
You're welcome.
presentation. Any questions or comments? Mark, you have a question?
Where are these books being stored?
We have them right now in our upstairs vault, the ones that we use all the time. We also have a downstairs vault, which has the older records in it. A lot of things, Mr. Struck, aren't bound, and they need to be, such as marriage applications. We have to save them. They're permanent records. And right now they're just basically in order, in a box, on a shelf. The vault it doesn't have bright lights in there. It's it's okay. It doesn't get humid, doesn't get damp, but I want to preserve those records. And a lot of people do genealogy, and they go back far, and we have records up until the 1600s.
Well, yeah, that was one of my questions on
Yeah.
where it was storing due to what
Yep.
just recently happened at Talano, where these are very vital.
Yeah.
They stayed dry.
Yeah, they
That's why I was
did.
wondering where they're stored. You know, was
Yep.
it down in the basement, or are
The-
we putting
I-
it in a secure location?
I will be honest with you. The only thing that got wet in our office when we had the flood was some censuses, and I did not want to have the town have to spend all that money to replace those censuses. So what we did was we took them apart, and I literally had a clothesline in my office with the clips, and they were hanging all over my office. They all dried. There was no damage because every day we would take a stack and just kind of peel it. And I didn't have to spend another $5,000, $7,000 to redo the census. I was ingenious.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Any other questions from the committee on this? All right, Diane.
I'm all for this. I can remember going in there and having someone years ago take out a great big book that they unrolled and unrolled and unrolled. But you're just actually making books of all of this stuff. How about scanning? And they don't use really microfiche anymore. They actually just scan.
They do. They have a thing called Laserfiche, and they scan all the things in there. It's like, to me, it's like a modern microfiche.
And is that what we're going to do now?
No, the books need to be preserved, and what they're going to do is they're going to take the books apart page by page, because especially in the older books, the writing is fading, and they're going to restore it. I had a couple of town clerks ago, one of the town clerk had the book go out, and all they did was photocopy them, and that damaged the penmanship. So we have the original still wrapped up in brown paper in the vault. So that's going to be one of the first books that I work on, because I want that penmanship saved. We have old marriage certificates from the 1900s, 1800s, and they're in books, but they're like this. And this book is only from 1944, so it's not even that old, and it's fallen apart. Sorry.
I'm a little younger than the book, thank God. So when people come in to look this up, they actually can go through these
No,
books?
I don't let them touch the books.
I was just going to say, I wouldn't.
No, what I have on, and I've been working with the town historian, Dave Lambert. Dave came into our vault, and he took pictures of all the old records. And what he did was he scanned them all in, and then we have links under genealogy that you can go on and find all of that. He did that prior to me becoming the town clerk, and I said, well, let's finish it so that it's not a half done project. And on my web page under genealogy, there's like free websites that you can go to find out, because believe it or not, a lot of people want the Mayflower information. They want to be part of that Mayflower Society. So we get a lot of it. And it's especially with that, the ancestry.com and the You and Me stuff, 23andMe. Yeah.
All right, I'm sorry, totally unrelated. Do we have any Mayflower ancestors in Stoughton?
We did. I don't know if you remember Virginia McGrath. She was our building secretary and the town hall president of the union, and she was a firecracker. But she came in and we she did that and she was part of it. So we did have someone. People come all the time, so I don't see everybody, but I just remember Ginny.
Any other questions or comments from the committee on Article 33, Preservation of Town of Stoughton Vital Records? Hearing none. Any questions or comments from the public on Article 33, Preservation of Town of Stoughton Vital Records? Cynthia, please identify yourself for the record.
Oh, sorry.
The microphone, yes.
Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street. I doubt. My family came over in 1627. The joke is we missed the Mayflower. We were all in the pub. Alluding to the previous article, I mean, Stoughton is even older than the old Stoughton Music Society. This is so important that we have our history preserved. If people don't care about it, fine. I'm on the 300th anniversary committee. But a lot of people do. And I think more and more young people are interested in finding out where their roots are. So I think it's important. Thank you for rescuing those census reports. I guess the next time the town clerks have some sort of convention, you can talk about the laundry line rescue.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments from the public? Article 33, Preservation of Town of Stoughton Vital Records.
I'd just like to make one comment about my clothesline in my office. Our nighttime custodian, Danny Andre, thought he would be funny, and he hung his work shirt on it. And I did take a picture of it and put it on the town clerk's website and say, this is what happens when you have a flood in your office and you have a funny custodian. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. No other questions, comments from the public? Article 33. Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steph.
Next item on the agenda. Article 34, Cedar Hill Golf Course renovations.
Yes, Mr. Chair. This is for some tee boxes and course renovations. Victor Baruza, the superintendent of Cedar Hill, brought this to us. Barry Kessler looked into it. This meets the requirements of the CPA law. Under the pot of recreation, on December 7th, 2022, CPC voted by a vote of 8-0 to recommend $195,000 in cash. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Victor, who is with us tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Hi, everybody. Victor Baruza, Cedar Hill Golf Course. So this project is in reference to what's transpired over the past 3-4 years since they gave us the money. The CPC gave us money for the renovations that we did at the 6th hole. We saw an increase of about 46% in business. COVID came. The restaurant came. We saw another increase in business, another increase in business. When I first took over, we were doing about 7,000 rounds a year. We just closed with about 20,000 this past year, just to kind of give you an idea. Before the 6th hole was done, we were doing at right about 11,000. So now we're at 20. We anticipated an increase in traffic. Didn't anticipate that kind of increase in traffic. The tee boxes are very, very small. They don't get a chance to recover when you move the tees around. Takes anyone that has a lawn, you know how long it takes grass to grow. It doesn't happen overnight. We do our very best, but it doesn't happen that fast. So you need a few days. Tee boxes are too small, so we would like to create a couple extra spaces, which would also create a new look on the golf course as well. So to get to the hole, and new and exciting positions on the golf course, and moving things around. Want to do irrigation down the first fairway, just for first look, first appearances, first and last impressions. Those 2 holes will have water on them, and that's that. So the initial price was $150 is the quote we had got from one of the vendors that have worked with us in the past. But under recommendation of the CPC, with the way the world is at the moment, with transportation costs and accelerated prices, we went with a 30% increase. So the number is fluffed by $45,000.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, that increase was recommended by the engineering department.
Right. Thank you very much. Questions or comments from the committee on that? Joel?
Once again, I want to talk about process here. This estimate that you have from Country Golf, does that mean that they're going to do the work based on this estimate?
They would have to go out for bid. So once we know it's approved, we would go out for bid. We would
Through procurement?
Yes.
Okay, and who would write up the bid specifications?
I assume Fran would do that. I mean, I would tell them what I'm looking for, and then she would put out the request for the RFP. Let's skip that, right?
Okay, and out of curiosity, Mark, is this going to be paid for with a bond, or is it going to be cash?
He told me that
Actually, Mr. Wolk, this is going to be 100% cash.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I thought you were going to give me a briefcase. Some small bills, you said.
Are you kidding me? Been
Any-
there, done that. Not working here.
Any other questions, comments from the committee? Bob, you have something?
Yeah, can you, as far as E is concerned, create a Pine Valley on hole 9, can you expand on that?
Pine Valley is just it's basically a waste bunker. It's to catch the balls before they go into the woods to help with the pace of play. Right where that landing zone, if they hit it there, it'll bounce into the woods, and then they spend 2 to 3 minutes, 4 minutes looking for the ball. Everyone's backed up at the tee box, and the whole idea is to push the cart path over to the woods a little bit, create a little bunker to catch the ball, and keep things. A Pine Valley is used with more of a mason sand. So it doesn't need as much maintenance, but and you can still hit the driver out of there, and get a full shot to the green.
Okay. And then
Fairway driver.
Well, Bob can't, but.
I was going to say, and as far as D is concerned, can you expand on that as well? Is that in front of the?
Oh, is that the wooden fence?
Yeah, the
Yes.
fence replacement?
So if anyone that's been to Cedar Hill, there's from the parking lot all the way up to the clubhouse, there's a wooden fence. There's a 3-tiered fence that goes all the way up that is completely rotten. We've spent a lot of time there. If you go up and look at it, it's a safety concern at this point, and it should actually come down. We've done a lot of mending and piecing together to keep it the way it is. Paint is peeling off of it, and the ends are missing, and we've made little caps for the bottom, but in short, it's falling apart, and we just want a good look. It wouldn't be PVC, it would stay wood. One golf cart taps it, and then we would have a problem. So I want it repairable and replaceable, not, I don't want more damage and at a higher cost.
Okay, thank you for that. And
Sure.
then the cart path removal, is that over off the first tee on the left-hand side, or?
No, that's actually on 9. It's right as the fairway to the green.
Okay.
It's just that little gravel path. It's just going to slide over to the wood line to make that way that entire area that's currently rough. I'm going to make that all fairway and playable.
Okay.
So it's going to be a better look and more enjoyable for those that are hitting off of it.
Okay, thank you, appreciate
Sure,
it.
no problem.
Any other questions, comments from the committee? Article 34. I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
A lot of this would appear to me to be maintenance. I mean, you're repairing tee boxes that are used as part of the daily play. Is that correct? Would this be considered
This
maintenance?
is to build new tee boxes.
Okay.
So that we have new looks. Because of the maintenance that's needed on the other tee boxes, we don't have enough time for them to repair. So I want to create some new tee boxes on some key holes. 1, 3, 4, 5, and 7th holes would all have new tee boxes in a new position. Some add a little distance, some a little to the left or right, and some a little forward. So they would act for they would just a new place for tees.
So just adding tee boxes,
Yes.
because the other ones need maintenance then, right?
Not
and the
just
grass
because
takes too long to grow.
Because they're getting so much traffic, they're getting destroyed, and we need a new place to put people.
Was there any discussion about using retained earnings? I thought, if I remember correctly, there was discussion somewhere at the CPC meeting about using retained earnings, and if there was discussion,
Right, we
how
are
much
going to
was
use
it?
a portion. We're I talked to Mark. We're going to chip in at least 20,000, but we do have a couple projects that are currently in the works with some of the retained earnings, including a cart barn coming up, not this year, but the following year, and.
So 20,000 in retained earnings. What do you have in retained earnings now?
Right now, there is $306,000.
So there's $306,000 in retained earnings, and CPC is looking to give how much for this?
We asked for as much of the retained earnings as they were able, from a budget perspective, to give us. 20,000 seemed to be the number that Victor and Mark worked out. Mark was working with Victor on the budget, if I'm correct on that.
Right.
But we were looking for a little bit from the town as a good faith measure on this.
So we had $130,000 in there for gas storage. We had $50,000 for small equipment purchases for maintenance, on a maintenance aspect.
For gas
And
storage? I'm confused by that.
For gasoline and diesel.
You're going to store, how much was that for gasoline storage? $120,000?
$130,000 is what the quote could be. There's two parts
Is there
to
an
it. We
article
went
for
to the
that?
higher. A gas tank, yes, a 250. It is an article, yes.
There's an article in the warrant for a gas storage
They
tank?
might be pulling it. It's the town manager had it. I think he's actually
Not-
pulling it.
It's not in the warrant.
Okay, then they pulled it.
Okay.
So
you were going to spend $130,000 of retained earnings on a gas storage that's no longer in the warrant then?
right. He said there's a possibility it was going to be pulled, and I guess it was. So
It's not in the warrant, so.
there you go.
I did not hear anything of that
Okay.
when they closed the warrant.
Okay.
So,
No,
To
they
my
did-
knowledge, they did not.
It was not discussed at the select board meeting.
Okay.
So you were holding $130,000 for a gas storage tank for an article that is no longer or never was put in the warrant.
Well, hopefully it will be in the future, but yes.
It's not in the warrant at this point, though. But a lot of this has to do with, you said a lot of traffic there, bringing lots of revenue.
Yes.
Okay, so then the CPC would be repairing all this stuff thing or adding these tee boxes?
That was the application, yes.
Okay, and the fence replacement, is
Mr.
that,
Chair, could I clarify something? The CPC is not allowed to provide maintenance for our open space or recreation. We're allowed to renovate or create. So when this came to us, this was considered a renovation of the existing 9-hole golf course. So it is not maintenance. I just wanted to be clear on that because by law, we cannot maintain property. We can only create or renovate.
all right, thank you very much for the clarification. Do you have any other? Yes.
I'm sorry, I have one point of information. As far as the retained earnings and the number that's there, by recommendation of Bill Rowe, an X amount of that is supposed to stay locked up as more of a safety while we're all learning that we're making money now, but there is a kind of rainy day fund to make sure that we're not a subsidy for the town ever again. So he recommended that X amount of it stay into.
But originally the discussion was to spend $130,000 on a gas tank, though. That was.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm familiar with the retained earnings discussion there. Any other questions from the committee on this? John, you have something?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Victor, I know the fence is a small part of this as it is, but
Mhm.
exactly where's it running and what is it for other than looks?
Fence, security. It's to keep.
It's a post and rail, isn't it?
Right. just it's. I mean, it's no, it's not barbed wire or anything like that. No, it's just where cars or carts can't go, and just to keep people on the path to the front door. Late at night, we have a restaurant, we have a bar.
Don't go there.
Can lean on it.
But
No, I mean, I
if
had-
the fence isn't there, golf carts drive wherever they want.
I had because I had the aerial up and I was looking and I'm saying, exactly what is the fence doing if it's?
No,
I mean,
it's
not a big piece of it, but.
No, but-
I was just curious what the purpose of it was other than. to look.
If you didn't have the fence there, people walk their they'll walk right up the side, like where the fence came down, where a tree came down. Guys will walk right up to the practice green with their golf clubs, and then at some point they will just walk off into the golf course. This is just to guide them by the front window.
That's fine.
That's basically it.
wanted to just hear what the.
And make sure they're not guiding golf carts where we want them to go.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
All right. Any other questions,
Just-
comments? Dave, you have
Just a
something?
very quick one to Yvonne. It's just, what was the vote? I don't remember hearing what the vote was on CPC.
8-0.
On December 7th, CPC voted 8-0 to recommend. Yep, December 7th, 8-0, recommend
Thank you.
195 in cash.
Any other questions or comments from the committee on Article 34, Cedar Hill Golf Course renovations? Hearing none. Any questions or comments from the public? Article 34, Cedar Hill Golf Course renovations. Hearing none, we'll move forward to Article 36. Thank you very much, Victor, for the presentation.
Thanks, Victor. See ya.
We're going to move forward to Article 36, parking and trailhead construction at Atkinson Ave Extension.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an article that fell under open space and recreation. It met the requirements of the state CPA law. On January 4th, 2023, we voted 7-0 to recommend $105,000 in cash. This is actually a secondary article from last year's annual town meeting article that purchased 7 roughly acres. 5.5 acres of land that would grant the town access to a much larger area that we currently do not have access to, at least not comfortable access. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Jerry McDonald, the chair of the Conservation Commission, who brought this application to us. Jerry?
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, board, for hearing this on our behalf. The Conservation Commission had about 100 acres of land in the Ryan Road area and Crockett area. And then we were donated 88 acres in the Atkinson Ave area that abuts it. So there's about 200 acres of open space in that area between Washington Street and Sumner at the foot of Ryan Road and extending through to 138. Subsequently, we wanted access to that, and we purchased 5.5 acres last year through a CPA article for $90,000, and we purchased that with the intent of putting a parking lot in and a trailhead so folks could access the 200 acres, which has very limited access from other points. So this article is to fund a small parking lot, trailhead development, just getting the trail into the woods, a monument to the person that donated the land or facilitated the donation, a small marker, and a kiosk for trail maps and announcements, etc. And obviously that was why we purchased the land, so this article does follow on that. And we used 105 because the engineering department in Town Hall said, the engineering costs and construction documents, et cetera, might be 20 to 30, and construction might be 50 to 75 for a small gravel parking lot. So that's what we're looking to do.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. Any questions? Or Joel?
Yeah, I think I kind of remember this. Is this behind Dana Barrows?
To the side. To the side of it.
To
It's
the
on
side
other
of it,
the
right?
street.
Off of 138, right? Yeah, I remember when the land was purchased. Once again, I would recommend that you put some kind of map or loca or something, or have the engineering department do a sketch so that people could see what it is you're actually talking about.
We do have a sketch,
That would be
a
very
concept
helpful.
sketch that we could provide for town meeting.
I think that'd be very helpful. If you could provide that to Mr. Inoki, and that'd be terrific.
Yes, I'll send that.
Thank you, Vaughn.
You're welcome. Any other questions, comments? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to commend you on the fine job you did in negotiations to get the property. It was a great deal. We should have you do that more.
I'm available.
If I'm not mistaken, this was actually discussed last year. You had a plan at that time, but you weren't ready to go forward with it. But I believe this is still the same concept that you were talking about last year. You just hadn't really proceeded with it. So I'm all in favor to finish off the project. You got the property, and I hope this goes forward, and I'm going to support it.
Thank you.
Any questions or Mark, you have a question, comment?
Yes, thank you. Through you. The parking area that I'm guessing, if I remember correctly, will be off of Atkinson's Ave extension.
Correct.
Is there going to be lighting in the parking lot or anything like that? Or is it just going to be a lot off to the
At this
side?
point in time, where the concept is a very rustic, small gravel parking lot. So it's going to be, in the vision of the Conservation Commission, is going to be no additional lighting than other than the street lighting that would be available on the street, because it's not anticipated that people will be going into the woods after dark. That would not be anticipated. There's very limited lighting at other parking lots that are available for conservation land access currently in town. So it's not really contemplated, Mark, at this point.
It was just brought to my attention where it's on the main road and it's at the edge of town, and just to curtail nefarious things that would go on in that parking area, because there is no light. It's kind of right off to the side, and a lot of things could go wrong if not protected.
Yeah, no, good point. Very good point. This parking lot is extremely close to the road.
Yeah.
You're going to turn in by the guardrail that's at Atkinson Ave. There's a guardrail that goes up that side of the road, and the entrance is going to literally clear the guardrail. Parking lot's going to be right there. But that's certainly something we probably could consider, but it's designed currently as a rustic, very limited lot. As Mark just pointed out, it might have some type of gate, but I think we're trying to keep vehicles out of the woods first off. But like if you go to the lesser playground right now, that's a playground, that's a parking lot that accesses the conservation land, and it's not gated currently. It was originally, but it's not current. The gate's not currently the gate's wide open now at all times. I don't know what the lighting situation is down there. Of course, I've never gone down there intentionally after dark. But
No lights on West Street.
yeah, at the corner, yeah.
Down there.
So it's really envisioned as kind of, rustic access point just to get people off the road at this point.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I think this is one of those situations, Mark does make a great point, where this is easily monitored directly from the road. It's not difficult to see in there. If there was a problem, I would think a gate would be appropriate, and that's something we could look at. We just didn't put it on the plan because I don't think we felt there was a need at this time.
Thank you very much for that. Any other questions or comments from the committee? John, you have a question? Dave, you have a question?
Do you, Vaughn? Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I like the project. I have no problems with the project at all. I just want to kind of get thinking forward. Is this one phase of many that you see going on to develop this conservation land? Or is this, is this kind of it? We can kind of wrap up here and say, okay, that's the only investment we're gonna have to make for quite a while. Like, I just want to understand how the visioning goes into these properties.
This particular area, again, there was a big chunk of it that was donated, and part of the donation required us to put in an access point and a memorial to a certain person associated with the donation. So we're required to do this. There is no good access point off of 138. You got a guardrail, you got a drop, you got a lot of wetlands, you got some active businesses there. So we were fortunate to find, while we were looking for access, we found 5.5 acres that were for sale, and we were able to get a very low price, so that was executed. There is as you go up Atkinson Ave extension, there's like a grass meadow there right now that you can see, and that's where the parking lot's going to go. So it doesn't really require a lot of clearing. It's got a little slope to it, so there will be some grading and things of that nature. But to answer your question, there's an extensive trail system already in these 200 acres, some of which is the 100 acres the town has controlled for I don't know how long, coming in off of Ryan Road and in that area. And even this parcel that was donated has extensive trails in it because kids find woods and they make trails, So eventually the next step would be, this hasn't really been fully decided, but the next idea would be okay, now if we have an access point, we will map those trails. We will map them with a GPS and create a trail map just like we have for Bird Street that you can download off the town website and go for a walk. And the trails will be marked. We recently had Bird Street marked by a Boy Scout. He did a phenomenal job. I mean, if you go out to Bird Street now, you're not going to get lost because the markings are just great. So that would be the next step, and I don't think that would be something we would, mapping the trails. We would not be coming back for funds. I don't really anticipate anything else that would require funds, but I can't rule it out. But I don't think we have any great plans.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks.
Mark, you have a question?
Yeah, I totally forgot. I don't know how I forgot about it. With this parking lot and where you guys were talking the trails and everything, is part of this going to be a crosswalk on 138 so we can access Bird Road to this parcel, or in between, so we can connect the two?
At this point in time, you got a busy highway essentially, so we're really not contemplating any type of advocating for that. The parcel does come right down to 138 in the corner of Atkinson Ave. So literally, if you step off on 138 into the woods, you jump into a deep gully first off, and a stream, and then you're on the land that we own. And on Atkinson Ave, we own the land right to the street. So as far as access to Bird Street, the Conservation Commission does own a very tiny little sliver that comes out to 138 near the gun club. It's not developed in any manner. There's no trail there that I know of, but that is something for future consideration.
Yeah, it'd be nice to connect both of the parcels.
Yeah, like I said, there's really there's a highway in the middle, so I don't know, but they're on a map. They come right down. They both come right down to 138.
Right.
In reality, I don't know how useful that would be, but there is no trail near the gun club
Well, it would allow the horses in another area to go on other trails besides just the Bird Street, stuff like that.
Yeah,
I know that the trails in Blue Hills cross the main roads over there, so there is ways to get us across 138.
And they could do it right now if they wanted to. It's just no official trail system, you know?
Right.
It's kind of like if you want to bushwhack through, go ahead. You know, the Conservation Commission won't stop. We do discourage people carving new trails without our approval. That happens a lot, but we are sensitive to that. We don't encourage it, but certainly tonight I could walk to the end. I could walk from Ryan Road to Atkinson Ave, cross 138, and walk in the conservation land. Again, there is no trail, but there's nothing stopping me.
All right.
Right. Right.
You
Thank
good?
you.
You, Mark?
Thank you.
You have something, John?
I think it was mentioned last year, but you're putting this parking area in and so forth, and you plan to go off into the woods. There was something about, I think, putting some kind of a blockade type thing so you wouldn't get the ATVs and so forth through there, correct?
Yeah.
Well, again, this is why people say, you know, if we had a little sketch or map, it would help. But that's what I believe was talked about.
The schematic plan that we have, engineering department did do a schematic plan for me, and we have that to send out for engineering bids, and then the engineering will get done. They'll do a full-scale plan, then we go for construction documents. We're very sensitive to unauthorized access by ATVs because they're doing a lot of damage. So this parking lot will be designed so that, you know, you can't get an ATV off Atkinson Ave and in. That's not to say there aren't other access points, you know.
This won't provide.
This parking lot will not be the preferred spot for your ATV.
It seemed that, you know, it was something shaking loose.
I think somebody did ask that question at town meeting before. And again, we're sensitive to that. We're trying to plan for that, as we are in a lot of other areas also.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Article 36, parking trailhead construction at Atkinson Ave Extension. I myself really like this article, and I really appreciate the process that the Conservation Commission has done in getting trails done, providing access to, you know, the resources like this. I think it's great. People can go on these, you know, walks through the trails, and I really appreciate everything that, you know, the committee's done to try to get this available to the public. I think it's great. And I support this. I remember last year we talked about the property, and then it was discussed then next year we'll do the parking lot. And you're just following right along with exactly what you said. Thank you. That being said, any questions, comments from the public? Article 36, parking and trailhead construction at Atkinson Ave Extension. Hearing none. We move on to the next item on the
Thank
agenda,
you,
Article 37.
FinCom.
Article 37, acquisition of property off Benson Road.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an article that falls under open space. It conforms to the state CPA law. This was approved on January 4th, 2023, with a vote of 7-0, in the amount of $220,000 in cash. And I would like to make note that this was an article brought to us by a resident in response to our requests for articles that would benefit the community as a whole. We felt this did. Her name is Paula Grubenska. She's with us tonight. And we ended up turning this over to the Open Space Committee because although Paula had the proper conceptual idea, she needed technical help, or we offered technical help, and that's where John Linehan comes in, and I'll turn it over to him. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. John Linehan, Chairman of the Open Space Committee and also the Open Space Committee rep on the CPC. And this was, I think it was Michael's idea to do this ad and encourage townspeople to put forth proposals that would benefit the town, and it was great. And I believe Paula saw it. Paula is right here. And if you don't mind, I'd love for her to just tell you what she was thinking when she thought about this whole thing.
When I saw the article, I was a town, originally was a town meeting member when the Goddard Highlands going through, which I hated immensely for what they did. So I made sure that if anything happens to me in the future, I want to make sure that nobody's going to come and develop the land. So because I have all my little animals, they need a place to stay, and too much development all over the place. So that's why I did it.
Thank you, Paula, and I think that that kind of thinking is really critical to the future of our town. I know a lot of you have heard me advocate for many parcels of open space, and I will continue doing that. I think it's so critical to the future of our town, our future youth, and the character of our town. And this is, Paula offered it to us at a discount. We're actually in the process of getting the appraisal finalized right now. But we do already know that, she offered it for $165,000 for 12 plus acres. And we know it's worth more than that, but we'll be happy to get that full appraisal out to you as soon as it's done. But it's a beautiful piece of property. And ironically, it butts right up against the property, Paula. We just had 50 acres donated to the town a few months before, and this is right up against it, so it enlarges that 50 acres and makes it that much more useful, and certainly a nice place for, I would say, particularly local people to hike. We have these other big parcels where people can come from all over town, but really nice piece of property that has Dorchester Brook going through it, and put in the $220,000 figure to make sure we can cover all the costs. We have the appraisal going on as we speak, although we took that in the end out of CPC administrative costs, which I didn't expect. So we'll probably have more left over, but we'll have a 21E done on the property. And then we'll have to have a conservation easement put on it, which is a requirement of the Community Preservation Act for property acquired with it, and we'll have to pay for that. So I'm sure I'm confident we'll have quite a bit left over at the end. But this was a nice opportunity put forth by one of our citizens for the future well-being of our town and the wildlife that lives on it. So that's about it, and you'll have the maps and sketches and all that stuff.
And if I might just add, Mr. Chair, I did look at public access to this property. The town owns a small sliver of land already from the road into this area, so this will grant residents access not only to the 12 acres we're looking to purchase, but also the 50 acres in full from this area, the Benson Road area, for those local residents who wish to hike it.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. Do we have any questions or comments? Mark, you have a question or comment?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I've been looking at the map that was sent to us and looking on Google Maps and everything else, and I still cannot figure out which actual property or what is what and who is what. Yeah, that's why I'm having a hard time really figuring it out.
We'll have better maps. It is difficult to discern, but
Benson Road, when you go past the hospital, it's a road that goes in the house, my property, the land I'm keeping is at the end of Benson Road, but the 14 acres go from there down the high tension lines and put 12 acres there. So it's the end of Benson Road. The land I'm bordering is a Goddard Hospital field when the land that they've donated that.
Yes.
John, do you have a question?
Is this property, because you mentioned the Dorchester Brook going through it. I mean, I just have the aerial view of the room. So if you came straight off of Benson, is this property going south from, you know, like along, paralleling Summer Street?
West. Directly west.
Directly west. Okay. So this is gonna go pretty much right into or up to the Goddard property?
That's right.
Okay.
And through you, Mr. Chair, we will, I'll ask Barry to find or attempt to denote this on a map so, and have that sent to the chair so it can be more clearly discerned what it is we're looking at.
All right, thank you. I just looked it up on maps and I found it, Dorchester Brook, and trying to find it. Any other questions or comments from the committee on this? Dave, you have something?
Yeah, on the same kind of thread of conversation, the access, is that from where your house is? That's the access point to the,
It's on the high tensions, the access is by my house.
by your house, but do people have to go through your yard to get to the, like
No,
where it
they
is
have-
today, you know?
They can go and park, because I have the high tensions there. They can park there and go down the high tensions, and all the properties, because the house is here, and Dorchester Brook is here. I'm keeping a little bit of land here, but the rest is.
But we don't have to go through your yard to get to this, right?
No, no.
We don't have to do that.
This is the cul-de-sac.
Right, right.
And I think she's talking coming right in here.
Right.
Mr. Chair, through you, as I was saying earlier, the town does own a small strip of property. Don't hold me to it. I believe it's off of Sumner.
Right.
And you could follow that. It is off of Sumner. You could follow that up and into the property as well.
This is the circle, this house, my house, you can't really
Right,
see
it's
it,
in
it's
here.
in there.
So this is the line here.
That helps too.
And then the high tensions
No,
are
that's
right here,
helpful.
so the property is all over here.
All right, any other questions or comments from the committee on Article 37, acquisition of property off Benson Road?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
The chair of the Conservation Commission has a lot of knowledge on this too. Would you allow him?
That would be great.
Oh, and
Yes.
he's vice chair of us.
That would
He
be
knows this, so he could probably clarify some of it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. I've been out there as part of the review of the Conservation Commission accepting the donation of the 50 acres that is in Goddard Highlands, and I've walked the land pretty extensively a couple of times. And I've looked at the maps. I don't have my computer with me tonight, but there is access in the Benson Road area to the parcel or area of her parcel that she's donating. There's also a access point on Schofield Drive, which is part of the Goddard Highlands. As you come up Kelsey Drive to where you go into the Goddard Highlands, that's where the conservation land starts, and I believe there's two parking spaces there, or an area where you can park, which we asked for, because that's the 50 acres that goes out back and around, and actually kind of encircles her property fits in like a key almost to this parcel that we got donated.
So it connects to the same.
Oh yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And so there's parking access on Schofield to existing conservation land. The high tension wires, I parked on Daly Drive Extension once and walked in down the high tension wires to the same parcel.
But, excuse me, if I could interject. So just to, because a lot of the information, it's hard for me to process because it's verbal and I don't quite picture it yet. But without the property, the C2 on the map, can you still get to the 50 acres at the Goddard, or is it essential to have this in order to get access?
No, there is.
So it's purely to preserve this property, not for any strategic reason other than that. Okay, that's.
Yeah, the 50 acres is there. It's protected. It's owned by the Conservation Commission. It has access on Schofield. So if this parcel is, shall we say, added on, that parking will provide access to this parcel also. But there's also a few other access points closer to where her property is.
Down to extensions that goes into the land. They can go in from there too.
All right,
Yeah.
well, I'll just follow up with, you know, it's okay, Vaughn, through you. Can you avoid the high tension to get access into this?
From
property?
Schofield Drive, yeah.
You don't have to deal with high tension, you can avoid it.
You don't
Right?
like the high tensions?
No, we don't like, it. It's a bad topic in this town.
Mine is a floor garden under the high tensions and I'm still alive.
Do they grow extra tall because they're under the, no?
It's only 23,000 volts.
So I hope that addresses the fact that this is contiguous to existing conservation land. There is access to it.
You said you've got parking, a couple of parking spots.
On Schofield Drive, you can park, and there's a large detention basin further down in on Schofield Drive with no houses in front of it, because some people don't like to see cars parked in front of the houses that they don't know, which of course you can park anywhere on the street, but you can park down that end that's not even off the road to access conservation land.
All right, thank you very much for the explanation. Any other questions or comments from the committee on Article 37, acquisition of property off Benson Road? Laura, did you have a question? Nope. Okay. Anybody else? I like the project. I mean, okay. Any questions or comments from the public? Article 37, acquisition of property off Benson Road. Cynthia, please identify yourself for the record.
Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street. Obviously, like a previous speaker, I'm more of a visual learner. Where is the Goddard Well versus this? The other side? I know Benson is further along, so is the Goddard Well before that?
It's like between the hospital's field and it's more towards Daily Drive,
Okay,
that area.
thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments from the public? Article 37, acquisition of property off Benson Road. Hearing none. Thank you very much for the presentation. And go to the next item on the agenda.
The final item, Mr. Chair.
Article 38, depot stabilization.
I'll get to that. There's a process here. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Article 38, which happens to be the last article of the evening from us, is for further stabilization of the Stoughton Railroad Depot. This falls within the parameters of the CPA law under historic preservation. On February 1st, 2023, the committee voted 5-1 to approve $200,000 in cash for this article. Just some brief history or background on this. There was a joint meeting with the Planning Board, the Community Preservation Committee, and the Redevelopment Authority on, I believe, the 17th of January with the Select Board, at which point in time, Select Board member McCrisky made this request to whomever could fulfill it. In this case, it was the CPC, not the Redevelopment Authority. This is a building of historical significance, and it's on the Registry of Historic Buildings. This article provides $200,000 to do some interior repairs on the building, get the heat running in the building, get the water running in the building, and provide up to one bathroom. And it will secure the building with some lock sets, and it will do some minor window work. This is not a full restoration of the space. However, the space is not readily accessible by the public now because of the damage within the building and the lack of facilities, the lack of heat, the lack of water. This is an opportunity for us as a town to open the building. It was one of my major concerns. If we give another $200,000 to this building, and I would like this committee to recognize that the CPC to date has only committee or entity in town that has spent money on this building. We purchased it. We put the initial renovation costs into it that we talked about earlier. We added another $80,000 to that, and we're here again with $200,000. So one of my requirements or desires was to make it accessible to the public and have an event there on a regular basis. I was assured that could be done with this funding. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions I can. Paul Jaffoon was the applicant of this, just so you're aware, and I do not believe Paul was able to be with us tonight.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. We have any questions or comments from the committee? Joel, you have a question or comment?
Mark, the one of the things that you attached is the estimate by Fogarty, who I know a lot about.
Yep.
And he estimates 240,000, and you're looking for 200,000.
That is correct. That was the applicant's request. This was discussed at great length at the Community Preservation Committee meeting when we approved this. We had one meeting to look at this and approve it. The explanation that Paul gave us at that time was that much of this work would be able to be done by their own people in-house.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
And
and that would have effectively reduced that cost.
the stuff that isn't going to be done, I don't see anything in here for design or construction documents.
That is correct.
Thank you.
So when we asked
Got an
about
answer.
that,
What do you want?
he said to us, look, a lot of this work's going to be done in-house. There will be some in-kind work done, apparently, that the town has arrangements with. The idea wasn't to preserve this building by any stretch. The idea was to open the doors, make it usable for. I know we've had yard sales in here to support a local nonprofit. I would like to see and said I want to see a farmer's market run out of here. This is a building, if we had heat, we could run a year-round farmer's market. Stoughton has a crisis when it comes to food. I mean, real food, whole food. So it doesn't matter what it is, but I want community events on a regular basis. to
Okay,
happen
so
here.
this becomes an occupied building. That means that it has to meet the building code and the town building commissioner. has
According
take a
to
look at it.
Paul, the purpose of this was to open the doors, and that is exactly how Mr. McCrisky expressed it at the joint meeting.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you, Joel. Any other questions, comments? Laura?
So building on that same kind of conversation, is there a longer term kind of plan, or is it going to continue to be these kind of incremental, like, let's start with opening the doors and see where that gets us? Or you're smiling, so I'm assuming the answer is
I am, through you, Mr. Chair. That is an excellent question. One of the reasons we discussed Article 69 tonight at great length was because of that problem. The attitude that we received from, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but what was expressed to us at the select board meeting is we need to start using these buildings or sell them. This was an attempt by the select board to engage the building, to start using it. I very much would like to know what the future of this building is as well. My hope is that if we do this, it'll open and an idea on that will develop, but that is not in my bailiwick. That is in somebody else's. So I very much want to see this used. It's senseless to have this building locked down with doing nothing. It's the centerpiece of our town center. And what are we doing? We're watching it rot. And, well, actually, we're investing money so it doesn't rot. But
yeah.
at the end of the day, you're right. Something needs to change.
Did we replace the roof on this already?
We repaired the roof and replaced the copper, yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So we've done a lot of that structural stuff. A lot of the pointing was damaged. A lot of the footings and underpinnings were being undermined with water. Those were repaired and water was diverted. The hard work's been done, but you got to get the envelope done.
Thank you.
This isn't the way to do the envelope, Mr. Wolk. I agree with you, but it's a start.
Thank you, Laura. Elliot, did you have a question or comment?
A couple of questions here. The interior of that, especially up in the tower, there's a great deal of water getting in between the stone outside and the brick inside. It's causing quite a bit of damage from spalling of the bricks. Has that been addressed?
To my knowledge, yes, through you, Mr. Chair. When we invested the $350,000, that was part of, and in an additional $80,000, part of the process was to ensure that the building no longer allowed water to infiltrate.
Right, because the infiltration was, I mean, there was some on the roof, obviously.
And it was doing exponential damage as a result.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And how about excluding pigeons?
To my knowledge, it's pigeon-free. I've been up in that bell tower, and it was pigeon-free when I was up there, but that was a few years ago now.
It's been cleaned out? That's nice.
Oh, it was cleaned out, absolutely. It was healthy, that the air was clean and healthy. There was no detritus there.
Yeah, I spent a good deal of time going up and down that tower, climbing the clock. Is the clock protected by any chance?
At this point in time, so just a little bit of history. It's on topic, but it's a little bit unrelated. The Redevelopment Authority engaged the process of having that clock restarted and fired up. Ultimately, because there was no use for the building and we did not know the future of it, at that time we made the decision to put the brakes on that. That is something that could certainly be looked at again if we do get a usage for the building, which I'm hopeful for. But at this point, we did have it looked at. It's sound, it's structural, and it's capable of being repaired at this point. Or it was when we had it looked at 3 years ago.
Yeah, I know quite a bit about that clock.
Would have cost us about $30,000 to repair it at that time.
Now, you're gonna upgrade the heating system. If
I-
you have water in the building, you have to do something with the heating system. And part of the interior decline is from basically lack of heat.
Yeah.
So you gotta, but the heating system in there was a dinosaur. It was originally coal-fired, because I spent a good deal of time in the cellar of that.
Hopefully not shoveling coal.
No,
I was,
other stuff up in the tower, actually.
when we asked that question, we were told that the heating would be revived, was the best way I can say it. They're gonna get it working. I am not a plumber, Elliot, and I can't tell you how they intend on doing that, but I was told that that's the intent. Heat will be provided to the building.
Because that will require an ongoing expense.
Mhm.
I'm saying on floor against anything else.
Mhm.
They're heating that building
Mhm.
because of its structure and the tight insulation, we'll say. It's going to be a ongoing expense for heating it. So even if you keep it at 55 degrees, it's still going to cost.
No, I agree with you. Town meeting made the decision to purchase this building 2014 or 15, and it was purchased, and now we have to do something with it. I agree. And I don't discount the fact that it will be costly, but
But I'll say this, that this is the first time in recent history that there's been some effort into the preservation of that building. But of course, there was that long period of time where we didn't know if we could have it, how much it was gonna cost, or anything about it. It was sitting there as
Yep.
like a bump on a log. So.
understood.
All right. Thank you.
Understood.
Thank you very much, Elliot. You good? Are you good? All right. Eric, you have a question?
Just what I think will be a quick one, because I saw the letter from the Department of Housing and Community Development about a grant, and I was just, in terms of assisting the town of Stoughton with a reuse study, are these tied at all together? Like, is that work contingent upon this repair work? Or are they totally separate lanes? Or are they sort of?
They're technically
symbiotic?
separate. They are separate through you, Mr. Chair. This was a separate request. Our interim town planner, Pam McCarthy, did apply for and receive a grant that would identify the best use for the building. That grant was, she got the grant, it was received. So to my knowledge, she's moving forward with that and expects to have that information by, I don't know if it'll be May to July, somewhere in that time frame, I believe.
All right.
Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Dave, do you have something?
I do. Yeah, thank you for bringing this forward. I have spent time in the building. I've spent time in the basement. I've spent time up in the belfry, and it's a healthy environment. The basement's boiler is a modern boiler that was turned off. It has to be turned on to be sure that it'll work, but it's not an old-fashioned coal fire.
Oh, I know it wasn't.
It's a modern electric-powered boiler. Okay, we need electricity in the building. There's a work order to bring a wire that was actually cut down that ran across the street to near the railroad tracks over by the Napa building. Is no longer a wire. They have to National Grid has a work order to come in and.
That's right.
It should be in any day. That's how close it is. Separately, the question of what's the purpose question. What is the purpose? There's a giant stack of purposes that you could come up as a town-owned building. I think one of the board members, Mr. McChrystal, said like 91 ideas that you can use for a town-owned building. One of which has to do with what we can do as a Little Theater of Stoughton, which I'm a member of, and come in and actually put in stadium seating to make it a small black box theater. Believe it or not, you could fit over 110, if not 120 seats in there, and put a beautiful show on it. As far as like timing, if you put in bare minimum requirements like this investment, you'll be able to have it ready in 3 years for our 300th anniversary, which there's many, many opportunities that could be leveraged from a gem like that in the center of town when you're having a 300th anniversary. What could be better than an environment like that to put on performances and displays of all kinds of historic things like that during that event? That's 3 years out. It takes forever to get these decisions made, and for decisions about what should be declared, and the declaration of what will be done should be a cultural center for the town of Stoughton. That's what I think. Now, but there is a purpose. There's many, many purposes as a town property that can be used in that kind of space.
Dave,
As a comment,
is your mic on?
Oh, maybe not.
All right, thank you.
Don't start over.
Don't start over, but thank you.
From the top.
Yeah, you
Thank
don't have to
From
stop.
the
Any
top.
other questions or comments? Any other
No, but I
questions?
do have questions. In the sheet that's in the CPA packet, I think it's probably by Paul Jaffoon because
It
it
would
has all
be.
those numbers. Why did he highlight in yellow some of the items in here? What makes those different than the others?
I believe those are the numbers that he used to draw up the estimate that totaled $200,000. Now, if you take the highlighted numbers, they add up to well more than 200,000. But as Mark explained before, some of that will be done in-house, and that will reduce the cost. But what he did was he highlighted, I believe, the aspects of the project that he tends to look at with this particular request,
Yeah.
not the dollar amounts themselves, because they're not full-blown. For example, the heating. He's not going to make a complete new heating system. He's just going to get what's there now working.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of people who are interested in seeing this developed, whether it comes from CPA or not. So I know that there's many different ways you could skin a cat, and it's great that you guys stepped up. You did it on an emergency basis, and you passed it at least 5-1. If not, it'd be nice if it was unanimous, but it wasn't. But that's fine because there are questions. But it's a great building. The problem is the heating. You can't operate in the winter without heating in that building. It's plain and simple. It was freezing in there. We had a great day. We had one day, it was over 50 degrees in the middle of December, and we sold a bunch of stuff, hundreds of dollars worth of fundraising, because people were happy to kind of come out and visit. The week after, we tried to run the same thing, and it dropped down below 30 degrees, 0. No one showed up. and we had hot Coke, hot chocolate, and everything, and it was very, very difficult even to make $1. So the heating would have made a huge difference if we tried to do it then. So I applaud this, if nothing else, to get the heat and to get the floors fixed so that it's safe for people to walk in there. And I think it's a reasonable amount of money, and I think it could get done because it's already safe. We already demonstrated that it's safe to go in there. So thank you very much.
Mr.
Thank you
Chair,
very much.
If I may
Dave?
just follow up.
Yeah,
quickly.
sure.
There's a couple things I want to clarify for the committee. We've spoken a lot about usage tonight. The issue from a bonding perspective isn't, are we going to have a farmer's market there, or are we going to, have dance recitals there? The issue is whether or not this will be a public usage or a private usage building. I wanted to clarify that because each of those two items have very different requirements for bonds. So for those of you who may not have been aware of that, it was important to me that you understood that's the issue, not are we going to have the little theater there or something like that. The second piece of it is we are nearing the end of the urban renewal plan for our center. And as part of that, we have identified this building as a priority for the redevelopment and flourishing of our downtown center, something that everybody in this room knows is very much lacking. So there's no question this building has a great deal of importance. How that building gets used remains to be seen from the select board, which is really the entity that makes that decision. So thank you for allowing me to clarify that.
Well, thank you very much. Any other questions, comments from the committee on Article 38, depot stabilization? Hearing none. Any questions or comments from the public on Article 38, depot stabilization? Hearing none, we will move to the next item on the agenda.
There is
Do we have
none.
any other
I'm out of the hot seat, aren't I?
Thank you very much for pointing out that there are no more articles on here. Any other matters? Yes, Mark. Yes, because they've already been advertised, so we wouldn't want to create confusion with the public where they're showing up at two different buildings.
I just
We'll
say it
see.
on the mic so if anybody's listening.
Oh, okay.
Is the meeting's going to be here next week, or are they going to be at town hall?
Here, yeah.
My mic
the
wasn't
mic
on,
wasn't
so,
on. Mic
so
wasn't
they
on.
knew
Thank
my
you.
question. So that
Yeah,
they're like,
yeah, thank you. Yeah, it would be here because we've already advertised it, so we don't want to create any confusion with the public.
Saw what it took to get the ad in.
no, I just wanted it to be clarified so nobody got confused and went over there or over here.
Yeah, but we will be monitoring the situation over there. Okay, any other matters?
Mr. Chair, if I might, I just
Yes.
want to thank the committee. This was an unprecedented number of articles coming out of the Community Preservation Committee this year. That was generated through our advertising and our diligence. But I wanted to thank you all for taking the time to listen tonight. We will be providing the information you requested through the chair this week, I anticipate, unless there's some pieces that we have trouble getting. But I want to get that brunt of the information to you, and I will be here when you guys are voting. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman Zamanian. Thank you very much, Barry. I'd like to thank the CPC. No.
I would make a motion to continue this public hearing till Wednesday, March 7th, at 7 p.m. in the Stoughton School Committee room where we sit today.
We have a motion and a second from Diane. All in favor? All opposed?
Okay. Now I would like to make a motion to adjourn at 10:46 Appletown.
Eric has a second on that. Motion and a second. All in favor? All opposed? Motion adjourned. No, meeting adjourned. Have a great night. Thanks for watching.